A silk emerald dress, a fake fiancé, a black helicopter landing in her quiet suburban neighborhood like the opening shot of a crime film. Madison Cole thought she was hiring an actor to survive one brutal family reunion. Instead, she got Damian Moretti, the most feared mafia boss on the East Coast, standing at her door in a tailored charcoal suit, silver eyes colder than winter steel, saying 6 words that would shatter her entire world. "I believe I'm your date tonight." What started as a desperate lie became the most dangerous love story she never saw coming. Will she survive falling for a man the entire world fears? Watch until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Tuckindi? Madison Cole's hands trembled as she fastened the clasp on the emerald dress. Silk, that cost 3 paychecks she didn't have, purchased specifically for tonight's annual Parker family reunion. The fabric clung to her like expensive armor, which was exactly what she needed. Because walking into that ballroom without protection was suicide. She checked her phone again. 6:47 p.m. The car service was supposed to arrive 13 minutes ago. Her apartment smelled like cheap lavender candles and the leftover Chinese takeout containers stacked beside her laptop. Outside her window, the October sun bled orange across the New Jersey skyline, painting her cramped studio in shades of desperation she tried hard not to acknowledge. This wasn't how her life was supposed to look at 28. She'd imagined something cleaner by now, something impressive. Instead, she was a freelance journalist, scraping together rent by writing corporate press releases about dental equipment and accounting software, work that made her soul feel like it was slowly drowning in beige mediocrity. Tonight, though, she had a plan. Madison grabbed her phone and dialed the escort service again, straight to voicemail. She cursed under her breath and threw the phone onto her unmade bed, then immediately picked it up again because panic was a terrible lifestyle choice, but somehow her default setting. The Parker family reunion happened every October without fail, hosted by her cousin Vanessa's disgustingly wealthy in-laws at some obscenely expensive venue designed to remind everyone exactly where they ranked in the social hierarchy. Last year it was the Grand Meridian Hotel. The year before, a private yacht club. This year, Vanessa had sent out gold-embossed invitations announcing the event would take place at the Meridian again. Rooftop ballroom, black tie required, +1s encouraged. Translation: bring proof. You're not a complete failure. Madison had attended alone for the past 3 years. 3 years of passive-aggressive comments from Aunt Diane about still being single. 3 years of Vanessa's perfectly practiced sympathy that felt more like a knife slid between ribs with a smile. 3 years of distant relatives asking what she did for work, then visibly losing interest the moment she said freelance writer. Not this time. This year, Madison had hired a fake fiancé. She'd found the service online after 2 glasses of wine and a particularly brutal afternoon spent watching Vanessa's engagement photos flood Instagram. Vanessa in a designer gown, Vanessa's fiancé who looked like he'd walked out of a cologne commercial, Vanessa's ring that could probably pay off student loans for a small country. The website promised professional companions for all occasions. Discreet, elegant, experienced actors who could play any role required. Madison had selected a package called The Boyfriend Experience and paid $800 she absolutely could not afford for 4 hours of someone pretending to be madly in love with her. His name was supposed to be Ryan. Corporate consultant, charming, safe. The website showed a photo of a man with neat brown hair and an unremarkable smile that screamed, "I won't embarrass you at family events." Perfect. Except Ryan was now 17 minutes late, and Madison's carefully constructed plan was unraveling like cheap thread. She checked her phone again. No messages. No missed calls. "Damn it," she whispered. Her mother had already texted twice asking if Madison and her mystery fiancé needed a ride to the reunion. The lie had started small. Just a comment during a phone call last month about seeing someone new, but her mother had run with it like wildfire, telling everyone in the family that Madison was bringing her serious boyfriend to the reunion this year. Now the entire Parker family expected her to show up with proof. Madison crossed to her window and looked down at the street below. No black sedan, no charming actor in a tailored suit, just her neighbor's rusted Toyota and a stray cat picking through garbage near the curb. Her chest tightened. She could still cancel, show up alone. Admit the whole thing was a desperate lie constructed by a lonely woman who couldn't stand the thought of another year being pitied by relatives who measured worth in salary figures and relationship milestones. But the thought of walking into that ballroom alone again, of watching Vanessa's perfectly shaped eyebrows lift in fake concern, of fielding Aunt Diane's questions about why she hadn't settled down yet, made Madison's stomach turn. She'd rather light herself on fire. Her phone buzzed. Madison grabbed it so fast she nearly dropped it. Unknown number, she answered. Hello? Silence. Then a man's voice, low and controlled. Madison Cole? Yes. Are you from the service? You were supposed to be here 20 minutes ago? Change of plans. Madison froze. The voice didn't match the friendly, polished tone she'd expected from Ryan, the corporate consultant. This voice had edges, weight, like it was used to giving orders that people didn't question. What do you mean, change of plans? She asked carefully. Look outside. What? Your window. Look outside. Madison's pulse spiked. She crossed back to the window and stared down at the quiet street below, suddenly aware of how exposed she was standing there in her expensive dress with the lights on behind her. I don't see anything, she said. Look up. She tilted her head toward the sky. At first she didn't understand what she was seeing. Then the sound hit her. A deep, rhythmic thumping that rattled her window glass and sent vibrations through the floor beneath her feet. Madison stumbled backward as the noise grew louder, closer, impossibly loud. And then she saw it, a black helicopter descending toward her street like something out of a military operation. Oh my God, Madison breathed. The aircraft dropped lower, rotors slicing through the October air and sending golden leaves spiraling in violent circles. Car alarms started screaming, lights flickered on in neighboring apartments. People poured out onto the street, staring upward in shock as the helicopter settled onto the narrow residential road with mechanical precision that seemed impossible. Madison's brain couldn't process what was happening. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. The helicopter touched down. The rotors began to slow. Through her window, Madison watched her neighbors gathering on the sidewalk like extras in a movie they hadn't auditioned for, faces lit by the glow of phone cameras already recording. Then the helicopter door opened. A man stepped out. Madison's breath stopped. He wore a charcoal suit tailored so precisely it looked like it had been designed specifically for his body. No wrinkles, no imperfections, just clean lines and expensive fabric that whispered wealth in a language Madison barely understood. His hair was dark, swept back in a way that suggested control over every detail. Even from her second-floor window, she could see the cold authority in the way he moved. Deliberate, unhurried, like someone who'd never been rushed by anything or anyone in his entire life. He looked up, silver eyes locked onto her window with sniper-like focus. Madison's stomach dropped. She knew that face. Every person on the East Coast knew that face. Damian Moretti, the most feared Mafia boss in America. Madison's phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor. This wasn't possible. This was insane. She'd hired a fake boyfriend from a website, not a... Her door buzzer rang. Madison stood frozen in the center of her studio apartment, heart slamming against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack bone. The buzzer rang again. Move, she told herself. Do something. Her legs didn't respond. Outside, Damian Moretti waited at her building's entrance like he had all the time in the world. Madison forced herself toward the intercom and pressed the button with a shaking hand. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Hello? Miss Cole. That same low voice from the phone call. Controlled, dangerous. May I come up? I think there's been a mistake. No mistake. I didn't hire you. I know. Silence. Madison's brain scrambled for logic and found nothing. Then why are you here? Because you needed a date, Damian said simply. And I'm offering. Madison's voice cracked. You're Damian Moretti. I am. Yes. But I... Open the door, Madison. It wasn't a request. Madison's hand moved to the door release button like it belonged to someone else. She pressed it. The lock buzzed. Somewhere below she heard the building's entrance door open and close with quiet finality. Footsteps in the stairwell, steady, unhurried, getting closer. Madison backed away from her apartment door, heart racing so fast her vision started to blur at the edges. She thought about running, climbing out the fire escape, calling the police. But what would she even say? A mafia boss just landed a helicopter on my street, and now he's walking up to my apartment because I hired a fake boyfriend, and somehow the universe decided to replace him with the most dangerous man in America? They'd think she was losing her mind. Maybe she was. The footsteps stopped outside her door. A knock. 3 times. Calm. Patient. Madison's voice shook. "Who sent you?" "No one sent me," Damien replied through the door. "I'm here by choice." "That doesn't make any sense. Open the door, and I'll explain." Madison stared at the door like it might explode. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to call the police, to do literally anything except let a mafia boss into her apartment. But underneath the terror, something else whispered. Curiosity. Because Damien Moretti didn't show up at random apartments in New Jersey for no reason. Men like him didn't descend from helicopters to offer fake date services to struggling freelance journalists, which meant something else was happening here. Something Madison didn't understand yet. She crossed to the door and opened it. Damien Moretti stood in the hallway of her rundown apartment building like a wolf in a rabbit den. Too large, too dangerous, completely out of place among the peeling wallpaper and flickering fluorescent lights. Up close, he was worse. Silver eyes that looked like they could calculate the exact amount of pressure needed to break someone. A jawline sharp enough to cut glass. No smile, no warmth, just cold, controlled power wrapped in an expensive suit. Madison forced herself to meet his gaze. "Why are you here?" Damien's eyes swept over her. The emerald dress, the heels she'd practiced walking in for an hour, the careful makeup she'd applied to hide the exhaustion beneath. "You hired an escort service for a family event," he said. "They subcontracted to a secondary agency. That agency contacted me." "Why would a mafia boss work for an escort agency?" "I don't." His expression didn't change. "I own it." Madison's brain stalled. "You... what?" Among other businesses, Damien stepped into her apartment without waiting for an invitation, forcing Madison to back up or be crowded against the doorframe. "The service you contacted is one of several legitimate operations under my portfolio. When your request came through, I saw your name on the file." And I remembered you." Madison's pulse spiked. "We've never met." "Yes, we have." "I think I'd remember meeting you 6 months ago," Damien interrupted quietly. "You interviewed me under the name Rebecca Lawson, corporate profile piece for Manhattan Business Review. You claimed you were writing about urban redevelopment and philanthropic ventures." The memory hit Madison like cold water. 6 months ago, she'd been assigned a puff piece about wealthy East Coast investors contributing to city housing projects. The editor had given her a list of names to interview, including a man listed as D. Moretti, real estate development. She'd shown up to a sleek office building in Manhattan, been escorted to a top-floor conference room, and spent 45 minutes asking questions to a man in an expensive suit who answered with the kind of polished corporate language that said absolutely nothing. She'd written the article, collected her paycheck, moved on. She hadn't realized she'd been interviewing a mafia boss. "You used a fake name," Damien continued, watching her face carefully. "Fake credentials. You asked questions that had nothing to do with real estate development and everything to do with money laundering, political corruption, and organized crime." Madison's throat went dry. "I was just doing my job. You were investigating me." "I didn't know who you were." "Yes, you did." Damien's voice remained calm, but something shifted in his eyes. "You knew exactly who I was. You just didn't care." Silence. Madison's hands clenched at her sides. "If you're here to threaten me, I'm here," Damien said quietly. "Because you're the only person who's ever interviewed me without fear or greed. You challenged me, questioned me, forced me to defend an empire I'd spent years hiding behind legitimate businesses and polished PR statements." He paused. "I never forgot that. So you... what? Tracked me down?" "I kept tabs on you." Madison's stomach twisted. "That's illegal? Unethical?" Damien's mouth curved slightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Yes." "Then why?" "Because when I saw your name on tonight's request, I realized something." He stepped closer, not threatening, just present, filling the space between them with the kind of quiet authority that made Madison's breath catch. You needed someone to walk into a room full of people who underestimate you and make them see you differently. And you think you're that person? I know I am. Madison's laugh came out sharp and bitter. You're a mafia boss. Exactly. Damien's silver eyes held hers. Which means when I walk into that reunion with you tonight, no one will ever underestimate you again. The words settled into Madison's chest like stones. He wasn't wrong. Showing up with Damien Moretti would accomplish exactly what she wanted. It would shatter every assumption her family had about her, prove she wasn't the failure they thought she was, give her one night of being seen as someone powerful instead of pitied. But it would also put her directly in the orbit of a man whose name appeared in federal investigations, unsolved murder cases, and conspiracy theories about political corruption. A man who'd just admitted to tracking her movements for 6 months. This is insane, Madison whispered. Yes. I should say no. You should. Then why aren't you leaving? Damien's expression shifted, just slightly, just enough for Madison to see something beneath the controlled exterior. Something that looked almost like honesty. Because for 6 months, he said quietly, I haven't been able to stop thinking about the woman who walked into my office, looked me in the eye, and asked if I ever felt guilty about the people I'd destroyed to build my empire. He paused. No one's ever asked me that before. Madison's breath caught. What did you answer? She heard herself ask. I lied, Damien said. I gave you the polished corporate response about economic growth and job creation and community investment. His eyes didn't leave hers. But the real answer? Yes, I feel guilty every single day. The confession hung in the air between them. Outside, the helicopter's rotors had gone silent. The street below had returned to its usual quiet, though Madison could still hear distant voices. Neighbors dissecting what they'd just witnessed, probably already posting videos to social media. Her phone buzzed on the floor where she'd dropped it. Neither of them looked at it. I need to know something, Madison said finally. If I say yes to this, if I let you be my date tonight, what happens after? After tonight? Yes. Damien studied her for a long moment. That depends on you. On me? On whether you want there to be an after. He said it simply, like he was discussing a business transaction, instead of something that felt dangerously close to a proposition. Tonight can be exactly what you paid for, 4 hours. I play the devoted fiancé. I make your family see you differently. Then I leave, and we never speak again. And if I want something different, then we negotiate. Madison's pulse hammered in her throat. Negotiate what? Damien stepped closer. Close enough that Madison could smell expensive cologne and something darker underneath, like smoke and danger, and things she'd spent her entire life avoiding. I've spent years building an empire that requires me to be ruthless, calculating, and completely isolated, he said quietly. I'm good at it, too good. But 6 months ago, you sat across from me and made me remember what it felt like to be challenged by someone who didn't want anything from me except the truth. His voice dropped lower. I'd like to feel that again. You want me to keep investigating you. I want you to keep seeing me as human instead of a monster. The words hit Madison harder than she expected. She thought about the interview 6 months ago, how she'd walked into that conference room expecting another corporate puppet spouting rehearsed talking points, and instead found a man who'd looked genuinely surprised when she pushed back against his polished answers. She thought about the loneliness buried in that surprise, and she thought about her own life, the cramped studio apartment, the freelance work that crushed her soul, the family reunion that represented everything she'd failed to become. Maybe they were both desperate in different ways. If I say yes, Madison said slowly, I need rules. Name them. Tonight is a performance, nothing real. Agreed. You don't touch me unless it's necessary for the act. Understood. And after tonight, if I decide I don't want to see you again, you disappear. No tracking, no following, nothing. Damien's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or understanding. Agreed, he said. Madison took a breath. This was insane, reckless. Possibly the worst decision she'd ever made, but walking into that reunion alone felt worse. Okay, she whispered. Let's do this. Damien's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. Then we should leave. We're already late. The reunion doesn't start until 8. We're not arriving with everyone else, Damien said. We're making an entrance. But the helicopter ride took 12 minutes. Madison spent all 12 of them gripping the seat with white-knuckled hands while Manhattan unfolded beneath them in a glittering sprawl of lights and steel. Damien sat across from her, calm and unbothered, like flying over the city in a private aircraft was something he did every Tuesday. He'd offered her a headset to block the noise, but Madison had refused. She needed the roar of the rotors to drown out the screaming voice in her head, asking what the hell she was doing. They didn't speak. Damien watched the city below with the detached focus of someone conducting surveillance. Madison watched him and tried to reconcile the ruthless Mafia boss from news reports with the man who'd confessed to feeling guilty about his empire. Both versions felt true. Both versions terrified her. The helicopter began its descent. Through the window, Madison saw the Grand Meridian Hotel, rising like a monument to excessive wealth. All glass and steel and rooftop terraces designed for people who measured success in helicopter landings. They're going to see us, Madison said suddenly. Damien glanced at her. That's the point. I meant my family. They're going to see us arrive in a helicopter. Yes. They're going to ask questions. Let them. The aircraft touched down on the hotel's rooftop helipad with barely a tremor. Through the tinted windows, Madison could see figures gathering near the rooftop entrance. Security, probably, or hotel staff trained to handle the kind of guests who arrived by air. The rotors began to slow. Damien unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, moving through the cabin with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He reached the door, then paused and looked back at Madison. Last chance, he said quietly. We can turn around. I'll take you home. You show up to the reunion alone and tell your family the truth. Madison's hands trembled as she unbuckled her own seatbelt. No, she said. I'm done being invisible. Something shifted in Damien's expression. Approval, maybe, or recognition. He opened the helicopter door. The October wind hit them immediately, cold and sharp, and carrying the distant sounds of the city below. Damien stepped out first, then turned and offered his hand. Madison hesitated for just a second. Then she took it. His grip was warm, steady, and completely controlled. The kind of hand that had probably signed death warrants and corporate contracts with the same pen. Madison stepped out onto the rooftop and immediately understood what Damien had meant about making an entrance. The Grand Meridian's rooftop terrace was full of people, not just hotel staff, her family. The entire Parker reunion had spilled out onto the terrace, drawn by the sound of the helicopter landing. Madison's mother stood near the glass doors, one hand pressed to her mouth in shock. Aunt Diane clutched her champagne glass like it might explain what was happening. Vanessa stood frozen near the railing, perfectly styled hair whipping in the rotor wash, her expression somewhere between disbelief and fury. Every single person stared at Madison and Damien like they'd descended from another planet. Damien's hand moved to Madison's lower back, possessive, protective, exactly the kind of touch a devoted fiancé would use. Ready? He murmured. Madison's heart slammed against her ribs. No, she whispered back. Good, Damien said. Fear keeps you sharp. Then he guided her toward the crowd. The walk from the helicopter to the rooftop entrance felt like miles. Every step brought them closer to the frozen tableau of Madison's relatives, all of whom were now processing the fact that she'd arrived at a family reunion via private helicopter with a man who looked like he'd walked out of a crime thriller. Madison's mother recovered first. Madison? Her voice cracked with confusion and something that might have been pride. Sweetheart, what? How? Mom? Madison forced her voice to stay steady. Sorry we're late. Traffic was terrible. Behind her mother, someone laughed. A sharp, disbelieving sound that cut through the wind. Vanessa. Traffic, Vanessa repeated, stepping forward in her designer gown and 5-inch heels that probably cost more than Madison's rent. You avoided traffic by taking a helicopter. Seemed efficient, Madison said. Vanessa's eyes moved to Damien, and something changed in her expression. Recognition, fear. She'd clearly seen his face in the news, in tabloids, in the kind of media coverage that followed men who operated in the shadows of legitimate society. And you are? Vanessa asked, though her voice had lost its usual confidence. Damien smiled, cold and polite, and absolutely terrifying. "Damien Moretti," he said smoothly. "Madison's fiancé." The silence that followed could have shattered glass. Madison watched the information spread through the crowd like a shockwave. Whispers erupted. Phones appeared. Her relatives stared at Damien with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for natural disasters or celebrity scandals. Aunt Diane looked like she might faint. Madison's mother just stared, caught between confusion and something that looked disturbingly like approval. "Fiancé?" Her mother's voice was barely audible over the wind. "Since when?" "Recent development," Madison said quickly, before her mother could finish the sentence and expose the lie. "We've been keeping it private." "Private?" Vanessa echoed, her eyes narrowed. "How convenient." Damien's hand tightened slightly on Madison's back, a silent warning or reassurance, she couldn't tell which. "Shall we go inside?" he said pleasantly, as if he hadn't just dropped a bomb into Madison's family reunion. "I'd love to meet everyone properly." No one moved. Then Madison's mother stepped forward, composure rebuilding itself like armor. "Of course. Yes, let's go inside. Dinner is about to be served." She turned toward the glass doors and the crowd slowly followed, still staring, still whispering, but moving. Vanessa lingered. "This is insane," she hissed at Madison as the others filed past. "You can't actually expect anyone to believe—" "Believe what?" Damien interrupted quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made Vanessa's words die in her throat. "That your cousin is engaged to someone successful?" "Successful?" Vanessa's laugh was sharp. "You're a businessman," Damien finished smoothly. "Real estate development, import, export, several venture capital portfolios. Perhaps you've read about my work in the financial press?" The polite thread underneath the words was impossible to miss. Vanessa's face went pale. Yes, of course." She stepped back, then turned and followed the others inside with jerky, uncertain movements. Madison waited until Vanessa was out of earshot, then looked up at Damien. "You didn't have to—" "Yes," Damien said simply. "I did." They walked into the ballroom together. The Grand Meridian's rooftop ballroom was exactly as obscene as Madison remembered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than her entire education, tables draped in white silk and set with silverware that gleamed like small weapons. The Parker family had gathered near the bar, a cluster of wealth and judgment dressed in designer labels and practiced smiles. Every single person turned to watch Madison and Damien cross the room. Damien's hand never left her back. They moved through the crowd like predators through a herd. Slow, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Madison felt every eye tracking their progress, felt the weight of whispered conversations and hastily typed text messages. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. She was terrifying. And it felt incredible. Damien guided her to their assigned table, a round setup near the windows, nameplates already in position. Madison's mother had seated them with Vanessa and her fiancé, probably hoping to encourage bonding between the engaged couples. Vanessa looked like she'd rather drink bleach. Madison sat down. Damien pulled out her chair first, then settled beside her with the kind of casual dominance that suggested he owned the room and everyone in it. Across the table, Vanessa's fiancé, a man named Brandon who worked in finance and wore his Ivy League degree like a badge, extended his hand. "Brandon Whitmore," he said with practiced corporate charm. "Vanessa's told me so much about you, Madison, though she failed to mention you were engaged to—" He hesitated, clearly struggling with how to finish the sentence. "Damien Moretti," Damien supplied, shaking Brandon's hand with exactly enough pressure to make the other man uncomfortable. "Right. Yes, Moretti." Brandon withdrew his hand quickly. "What is it you do exactly?" "I manage investments," Damien said smoothly. "What kind of investments?" "The profitable kind." The answer was polite, vague, and absolutely designed to shut down further questions. Brandon got the message. Dinner arrived in waves of overpriced food arranged like small sculptures on oversized plates. Madison barely tasted any of it. She was too focused on the performance, the way Damien played the role of devoted fiancé with terrifying precision. He listened when she spoke, touched her hand when she reached for her water glass, leaned in close when her mother asked questions about how they met, letting Madison take the lead on the story while he added small details that made the lie sound dangerously real. "We met through work," Madison said carefully. "I was writing a profile piece. And she asked me questions no one else had the courage to ask," Damien added, his eyes on Madison like she was the only person in the room. It should have felt like acting. It didn't. Somewhere between the second course and dessert, Madison realized Damien wasn't pretending anymore. The way he looked at her, like she mattered, like her opinions were worth listening to, like she was something valuable instead of someone to pity, felt too real to be performance. And that terrified her more than anything else tonight. After dinner, the crowd migrated toward the bar and the small dance floor that had been set up near the windows. Madison excused herself to the restroom, needing 60 seconds away from Damien's presence to breathe. She was washing her hands when Vanessa walked in. "This is pathetic," Vanessa said without preamble. "Even for you." Madison met her cousin's eyes in the mirror. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You hired him," Vanessa hissed. "Don't lie. You hired a fake fiancé because you couldn't stand showing up alone again." "You're wrong." "Am I?" Vanessa stepped closer, her reflection sharp with triumph. "I know exactly who Damien Moretti is. And I know he doesn't date struggling freelance journalists who can barely afford rent." Madison's hands clenched around the edge of the sink. "So what's your plan?" Vanessa continued. "Show up tonight, make everyone think you finally made something of yourself, then disappear before anyone realizes it's all fake?" "Get out," Madison said quietly. "Or what? You'll have your criminal boyfriend threaten me?" "He's not—" The restroom door opened. Damien stepped inside like he belonged there, his silver eyes moving from Madison to Vanessa with cold assessment. "This is the women's restroom," Vanessa said sharply. "I'm aware." Damien's voice was calm, controlled, and absolutely final. "Leave." "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Vanessa opened her mouth to argue, took one look at Damien's expression, and thought better of it. She turned and left without another word, the door swinging shut behind her with hollow finality. Madison exhaled slowly. "You didn't have to—" "She was hurting you," Damien said simply. "I can handle Vanessa." "I know you can." He stepped closer. "But you shouldn't have to." The restroom felt suddenly smaller. Madison turned to face him fully. "Why are you really here, Damien?" "I told you." "No, the real reason." Her voice shook slightly. "Because this stopped feeling like a performance somewhere between the helicopter and dessert, and I need to know what I'm actually doing here." Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, 6 months ago, you looked at me and saw a person instead of a monster. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have." His eyes held hers. "I've spent years being feared, respected, obeyed, but never seen. And then you walked into my office and treated me like I was human enough to be held accountable for my choices." He paused. "I wanted to feel that again. So when I saw your name on tonight's request, I took the chance." "This is insane," Madison whispered. "Yes. I should walk away right now." "You should." "Then why aren't you leaving?" Damien reached up slowly and brushed a strand of hair from Madison's face, gentle, careful, like she was something fragile instead of someone he'd just met. "Because," he said quietly, "for the first time in years, I don't want to." The confession hung between them like a lit match near gasoline. Madison's heart hammered against her ribs. Every rational thought screamed at her to step back, to end this before it became something she couldn't control. But instead she heard herself say, "What happens after tonight? That depends on you. On whether I want to see you again?" "Yes." Madison took a breath. "And if I do?" Something shifted in Damien's expression, hope, maybe, or hunger. "Then we negotiate," he said. "Negotiate what? How often? How public? How real?" His voice dropped lower. "How dangerous you're willing to let this become." The words settled into Madison's chest like stones. She thought about her cramped apartment, her failing career, her family's pitying looks. She thought about the way Damien had defended her tonight without hesitation, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered, And she thought about how lonely she'd been for so long that she'd hired a stranger to pretend to love her just to survive one family dinner. Maybe Damien was dangerous, but loneliness was killing her. Okay, Madison whispered. Damien's eyes darkened. Okay, I want to see you again. The words hung in the air between them. Then Damien stepped back, putting careful distance between them, like he didn't trust himself to stay close. Then we'll negotiate terms, he said, but not tonight. Tonight we finish the performance. And after? After, I take you home. His voice was rough. And we figure out what the hell we're doing before someone gets hurt. Madison nodded. They returned to the ballroom together. The rest of the reunion passed in a blur of champagne and forced conversations and relatives who suddenly treated Madison like she was someone worth knowing. Vanessa avoided her completely. Her mother kept staring like she couldn't quite believe what was happening. Aunt Diane asked invasive questions about wedding plans that Madison deflected with practiced vagueness. Through it all, Damien stayed close, protective, attentive, playing his role so perfectly that Madison kept forgetting it was supposed to be fake. At midnight, he leaned in close and murmured, "Ready to leave?" Madison nodded. They said their goodbyes. Madison's mother hugged her tightly and whispered, "He's different from what I expected. Be careful, sweetheart." Madison promised she would. The helicopter was waiting on the rooftop. They flew back across Manhattan in silence, the city sprawling beneath them in rivers of light and shadow. When they landed on Madison's quiet suburban street, the neighborhood was dark and still. No cameras this time, no witnesses, just autumn wind and distant sirens. Damien walked her to her building's entrance. They stood facing each other on the cracked sidewalk, and for the first time all night, neither of them knew what to say. Finally, Damien broke the silence. "I meant what I said earlier," he said quietly. "If you want to walk away after tonight, I'll disappear. No tracking, no following. You'll never hear from me again." Madison looked up at him. This dangerous, lonely man who'd just spent 4 hours pretending to love her and somehow made it feel real. "And if I don't want you to disappear?" she asked. Damien's expression shifted. "Then give me your real number, not the one you used for the escort service, your actual number." Madison hesitated. This was the moment, the choice that would determine whether tonight stayed a performance or became something neither of them could control. She pulled out her phone and recited the number. Damien entered it into his own phone without breaking eye contact. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "Okay. And Madison?" "Yes?" His silver eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for seeing me as human tonight, even if it was just for a few hours." Then he turned and walked back to the helicopter. Madison stood on the sidewalk and watched him leave, watched the aircraft rise into the October sky and disappear into the darkness beyond the city lights. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She opened the message. "Sleep well, Madison. Tomorrow, we negotiate what comes next." Madison stared at the text for a long moment. Then she walked inside, climbed the stairs to her apartment, and collapsed onto her unmade bed, still wearing the emerald dress. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Vanessa. "I know what you're doing, and when this blows up in your face, don't come crying to me." Madison deleted the message without responding. She lay in the darkness, heart still racing, and thought about silver eyes and helicopter rides and the most dangerous man on the East Coast asking her to see him as human. Somewhere across the city, Damien Moretti was probably doing the same thing, and neither of them had any idea how badly this was about to destroy them both. Damien called at 7 the next morning. Madison was still in bed, half asleep, entangled in sheets that smelled like cheap detergent and the fading remnants of expensive perfume she'd borrowed from a coworker for the reunion. Her phone vibrated against the nightstand with enough force to rattle the empty coffee mug beside it. She grabbed it without checking the screen. "Hello?" Her voice came out rough, scraped raw by exhaustion. "Did I wake you?" Damien's voice was crisp, alert, like he'd been awake for hours. Madison sat up too fast. Her head spun. "It's 7 in the morning. I'm aware. Normal people sleep past 7 on Sundays. I'm not normal people." A pause. "And neither are you, apparently. I checked your publication history last night. You wrote a piece about pension fund embezzlement at 3 in the morning last Tuesday." Madison's stomach dropped. "You're tracking my work schedule? I'm paying attention, Damien corrected smoothly. There's a difference. That's a creepy difference. Noted. He didn't sound particularly concerned. Get dressed. I'm sending a car in 30 minutes. For what? Breakfast. I didn't agree to breakfast. You agreed to negotiate what comes next, Damien interrupted. Negotiations require conversation. Conversation requires presence. Therefore, breakfast. Madison pressed her palm against her forehead, trying to force her brain into coherent thought. Last night felt like a fever dream. Helicopters and rooftop landings and silver eyes that looked at her like she mattered. In the cold morning light, it all seemed insane. I need more than 30 minutes, she said. You have 28 now. Damien, the car will wait if necessary, but I'd prefer punctuality. His voice softened slightly. Please, Madison. The please did something to her chest she didn't want to examine. Fine, she muttered. Where are we going? You'll see. He hung up before she could argue. Madison stared at her phone for 5 full seconds, then launched herself out of bed and stumbled toward the shower. 28 minutes later, she stood on the sidewalk outside her building wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, hair still damp and pulled into a messy bun. No makeup, because there hadn't been time. A black Mercedes pulled up exactly on schedule. The driver stepped out. A man in his 50s with a military bearing and the kind of face that suggested he'd seen things that would give normal people nightmares. He opened the rear door without a word. Madison hesitated. Getting into this car meant crossing a line she couldn't uncross. Last night had been a performance, a desperate lie to survive a family reunion. This was something else. This was a choice. The driver waited patiently, expression neutral. Madison got in. The interior smelled like leather and something expensive she couldn't identify. The seats were heated. Classical music played softly through hidden speakers, something string-heavy and melancholic. The driver closed her door and returned to the front seat. Where are we going? Madison asked. Mr. Moretti's residence? The driver replied, pulling smoothly into traffic. Madison's pulse spiked. His? He thought you'd be more comfortable discussing terms in private. Private meaning his home. Yes, ma'am. The ma'am felt wrong in Madison's mouth, like she was someone important instead of a freelance writer who bought discount bread and rationed coffee because groceries were expensive. They drove through Manhattan in silence. Madison watched the city transform around them, from her neighborhood's rundown familiarity to progressively wealthier streets where buildings looked like monuments to excess. The Mercedes finally stopped in front of a sleek high-rise that screamed money in the kind of quiet, refined way that didn't need to shout. The driver opened her door. Madison stepped out onto pristine sidewalk and stared up at the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected morning sunlight. A doorman in an actual uniform stood at attention near the entrance. This way, please, the driver said. He guided her through a lobby that looked like it belonged in an art museum. Marble floors, abstract sculptures, furniture that probably cost more than her entire apartment's contents combined. The doorman nodded respectfully as they passed. They took a private elevator that required a key card to operate. The numbers climbed. 10th floor, 20th, 30th. They didn't stop until the display read, PH Penthouse. Of course, Damien Moretti lived in a penthouse. The elevator doors opened directly into his apartment. Madison stepped out and her breath caught. The space was massive, open-concept living area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, modern furniture in shades of black and gray and chrome, everything clean and sharp and deliberately intimidating. Art hung on the walls that Madison recognized from auction catalogs she'd browsed during lonely research binges. The kitchen gleamed with appliances that probably cost more than her car. Damien stood near the windows wearing dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. No tie, no jacket, just clean lines and controlled power. He turned when she entered. You're punctual, he said. Your driver was very insistent. Marcus is good at his job. Damien gestured toward a dining table set for two near the windows. Coffee? Please. He poured from a French press that sat on the table. Real coffee. The expensive kind that smelled like Madison's lost dreams of financial stability. He handed her a cup. Their fingers brushed. Madison pulled back too quickly and nearly spilled coffee on herself. Damien's mouth curved slightly. Nervous? Cautious, Madison corrected, taking a careful sip. The coffee was perfect. She hated that it was perfect. You did land a helicopter on my street and admit to tracking my movements for 6 months. Fair point. Damien settled into the chair across from her with the kind of casual elegance that suggested he'd never been uncomfortable anywhere in his life. So, let's negotiate. Negotiate what exactly? What you want from me. What I want from you. Where the boundaries are. Madison set down her coffee cup. You first. I want to see you again, Damien said simply. Regularly. Not as a performance, as something real. Define real. Dinner, conversation, time spent in each other's company without the pretense of fake engagements or family reunions. He paused. I want to know you, Madison. Actually know you. Why? I told you last night. No. The real reason. Madison leaned forward. Because men like you don't pursue struggling freelance journalists unless there's something in it for them. So what do you actually want? Damien was quiet for a long moment, silver eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin feel too tight. Honesty? He said finally. Please, I'm tired. The confession came out rough, like admitting weakness physically hurt him. I've spent 15 years building an empire that requires me to be ruthless, calculating, and completely isolated. I'm good at it, too good. But it's exhausting pretending to be a monster 24 hours a day when all I want is 30 seconds of being treated like a human being. Madison's chest tightened. And you think I can give you that? You already did. 6 months ago, when you interviewed me. Last night, when you looked at me like I was someone worth knowing instead of someone to fear. He paused. I want more of that. Even if it's selfish, even if it puts you at risk. What kind of risk? The kind that comes from being associated with me publicly. Damien's voice flattened. My world is dangerous, Madison. People who get close to me become targets, rivals, enemies, the federal government. I can protect you from most of it, but not all of it, and I won't lie about that. So why ask me to take the risk at all? Because I'm selfish, Damien said quietly. And because you're the first person in years who's made me want something other than power. The words settled between them like a lit fuse. Madison picked up her coffee and drank slowly, buying herself time to think. Outside the windows, Manhattan sprawled in morning light. A city full of normal people living normal lives that didn't involve mafia bosses and penthouse negotiations. She could leave right now. Walk out. Go back to her cramped apartment and her failing career and her quiet, safe, desperately lonely existence. Or she could stay. I have conditions, Madison said finally. Damien's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Relief, maybe. Name them. First, I'm not your possession. We're not faking a relationship anymore, which means I make my own choices. You don't control where I go, who I talk to, or what I write. Agreed. Second, transparency. If something in your world affects me, I need to know about it. No surprises, no protecting me by keeping me ignorant. That's dangerous. That's my condition. Damien studied her for a long moment. Agreed, with one caveat. What? There are things I can't tell you because telling you makes you complicit. I won't put you in a position where you're legally required to report something I've confessed. Madison nodded slowly. That was fair. Terrifying, but fair. Third condition, she continued, I keep my career. I keep investigating stories, including stories about organized crime and political corruption. If something I write implicates your world, you don't interfere. Even if it puts you at risk? Especially then. Damien's jaw tightened. That's not acceptable. Then we're done here. Madison started to stand. Wait! Damien's voice cut through the space between them like a blade. Compromise. You keep your career, you investigate whatever you want. But if I believe a story puts you in immediate danger, I reserve the right to provide protection whether you want it or not. Protection meaning armed guards following me around? If necessary. That's going to make interviewing sources difficult. Then they'll be discreet. Damien's eyes held hers. I won't compromise on your safety, Madison. That's my line. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she didn't need protection from a world she'd spent years investigating as a journalist. But looking at Damien's expression, the cold certainty in his eyes that said he'd burn the city down before letting her get hurt, she realized arguing was pointless. "Fine," she said. "Discreet protection when you deem it necessary." Agreed. Madison sat back down. "Anything else?" "Yes." Damien's voice softened slightly. "If at any point this becomes too much, too dangerous, too complicated, too damaging to your life, you tell me, and I let you go. No tracking, no following, clean break." "You'd actually do that?" "I'd hate it," Damien said quietly. "But yes." The honesty in his voice did something to Madison's chest she didn't want to examine. "Okay," she said. "Then we have a deal." Damien extended his hand across the table. Madison hesitated, then shook it. His grip was warm, controlled, and entirely too intimate for a business negotiation. "So what happens now?" Madison asked, pulling her hand back carefully. "Now," Damien said, "we have breakfast. And you tell me why you became a journalist." "Why do you care?" "Because I want to know you." He stood and moved to the kitchen, returning with covered dishes that he set on the table. Real eggs, real bacon, bread from a bakery in Brooklyn that only opens 3 days a week. Madison stared at the food. "You cooked?" "I had it delivered. But I can cook if that's important to you." "It's not... I just..." She didn't know how to finish that sentence. Damien uncovered the dishes and served her plate himself. Movements efficient and strangely domestic for a man who probably had people killed before breakfast. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Damien said, "So, why journalism?" Madison stabbed at her eggs. "Why does anyone become a journalist?" "That's not an answer." "Fine." She set down her fork. "When I was 16, my father embezzled money from the company he worked for, small amounts over several years. Nobody noticed until the company went bankrupt and the auditors started digging." Damien went very still. "Did they prosecute?" "He disappeared before they could, left my mother with debt collectors and a mortgage she couldn't pay. We lost the house, lost everything." Madison's voice flattened. "I became a journalist because I wanted to expose people like him. People who lie and steal and destroy lives while hiding behind respectable facades. And now you're having breakfast with a man who's built an empire on lies and theft. I'm aware of the irony. Does it bother you?" Madison looked at him, really looked at him. At the expensive apartment and the tailored clothes and the controlled power radiating from every carefully measured movement. "Yes," she said honestly, "but you're also the first person in years who's looked at me like I matter. So I'm trying to reconcile those two things." Damien's expression shifted. "What if you can't?" "Then I walk away." Madison met his eyes. "That's what the clean break condition is for." "Fair enough." Damien resumed eating, but something had changed in the set of his shoulders. Tension, maybe, or recognition that this thing between them had an expiration date built into its foundation. They finished breakfast with safer conversation. Madison's terrible apartment, Damien's collection of first edition books he admitted he never read, the strange intimacy of learning someone through small details instead of grand confessions. By the time Marcus drove Madison home 3 hours later, she felt like she'd crossed into a different reality. One where Mafia bosses made her coffee and asked about her childhood. One where danger felt like possibility instead of threat. One where she was absolutely going to get hurt. The week that followed was surreal. Damien called every morning at 7. They talked about nothing important, what Madison was writing, what Damien was reading, whether the coffee shop on her corner was actually any good or just convenient. On Tuesday, a delivery arrived at her apartment. Expensive coffee, the same kind Damien had served her. Madison called him immediately. "You can't just send me things." "Why not?" "Because it's weird. It's coffee, Madison, not a marriage proposal." "It's expensive coffee." "Then enjoy it." He paused. "Unless you'd prefer I stop?" Madison looked at the bag of coffee sitting on her counter, smelling like every expensive breakfast she'd never been able to afford. "No," she admitted. "Don't stop." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Good." Wednesday, he invited her to dinner at a restaurant that required reservations 6 months in advance. Madison wore the emerald dress again because it was the only thing in her closet that didn't scream struggling freelancer. Damien picked her up himself this time, driving a black Aston Martin that made her neighbors stare. Dinner was perfect. Too perfect. The food tasted like art. The wine cost more than her monthly rent. Other diners kept glancing at their table with the kind of recognition that suggested they knew exactly who Damien was. Madison felt like an imposter the entire time. Afterward, Damien drove her home and walked her to her building's entrance. "Thank you for tonight," Madison said. "Thank you for tolerating my world." "It's not tolerating if I'm choosing it. Are you?" Damien's eyes searched hers. Choosing it? Madison thought about her cramped apartment waiting upstairs. Her inbox full of rejection letters from publications that didn't want her work. The quiet, desperate loneliness that had become her default state. "I don't know yet," she said honestly, "but I'm trying." Damien nodded slowly. Then he leaned in and kissed her forehead, gentle, careful, achingly brief. "That's enough," he said quietly. He left before she could respond. Thursday, everything changed. Madison was working on a story about zoning violations in Brooklyn when her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Hello? Madison Cole?" A woman's voice, professional, cold. "Speaking. This is Jennifer Park from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I need to speak with you about Damien Moretti." Madison's blood went cold. "We know you've been seen with him publicly, multiple times. We have photos." A pause. "We'd like you to come in for a voluntary interview." "About what?" "About your relationship with Mr. Moretti and any information you might have regarding his business operations." Madison's hands started shaking. "I don't know anything about his business." "Then the interview will be brief." Jennifer Park's voice remained professionally neutral. "But I should inform you that refusing to cooperate could be viewed as obstruction, particularly if we have reason to believe you're withholding relevant information." "That's tomorrow. 10 a.m. District Attorney's Office. We'll send you the address." The line went dead. Madison stared at her phone. This was real. The danger Damien had warned her about was real. She called him immediately. "Madison?" He answered on the first ring. "What's wrong?" "The DA's office just called. They want to interview me about you." Silence. Then, "When?" "Tomorrow morning." "Don't go." "I don't think I have a choice." "You always have a choice." Damien's voice went flat and cold. The voice of a man used to making problems disappear. "Let me handle this." "Handle it how?" "By making it clear you're off limits." "Damien, you can't." "Yes, I can. And I will." A pause. "Stay home tomorrow. Don't answer your door. Don't talk to anyone from the DA's office. I'll take care of it." "That sounds like obstruction." "It's protection." His voice softened slightly. "Trust me, Madison. Please." Madison closed her eyes. This was the moment she'd known was coming. The moment when Damien's world stopped being theoretical danger and became concrete threat. "Okay," she whispered. "I trust you." "Good. I'll call you later." He hung up. Madison sat in her apartment and tried not to think about what handling it meant when a Mafia boss wanted to make a problem disappear. Friday morning, she stayed home like Damien had instructed. Her phone rang at 11. Blocked number. She didn't answer. It rang again at noon, again at 1. At 2, someone knocked on her apartment door. Madison froze. "Miss Cole?" A man's voice. Authoritative. "This is Agent Michael Ross with the FBI. We need to speak with you about Damien Moretti." Her stomach dropped. "I know you're home, Miss Cole. Your neighbor saw you this morning." A pause. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice." Madison's hands trembled as she crossed to the door. She opened it. 2 men in dark suits stood in her hallway. One held up FBI credentials. "May we come in?" Agent Ross asked. "Do I have a choice?" "You always have a choice. But refusing to cooperate makes us wonder what you're hiding." Madison stepped aside. The agents entered her cramped apartment and looked around with the kind of professional assessment that made Madison feel like a suspect instead of a witness. "Nice place," Agent Ross said without conviction. He was younger than his partner, sharp-eyed and visibly impatient. "How long have you been seeing Damien Moretti?" "I'm not seeing him. You had dinner with him Wednesday night at Maria," reservations under his name. You left together at 10:47 p.m. Ross pulled out a tablet and showed her photos. That looks like seeing him to me. Madison's chest tightened. They'd been watching, following, building a case. We're friends, she said carefully. Friends. Ross's partner, an older man with gray hair and tired eyes, smiled without humor. When did you become friends with a known organized crime figure? I interviewed him 6 months ago for a story. About what? Urban development, real estate investment. And that interview led to a friendship? Eventually, Ross leaned against her kitchen counter. Let me tell you what we think happened, Miss Cole. We think Damian Moretti saw an opportunity. A journalist with access to sources, information, investigative resources. Someone who could be useful. So he cultivated a relationship, made you feel special, important, and now you're compromised. That's not... Have you given him information about any of your sources? The older agent interrupted. Names of people you've interviewed? Details about ongoing investigations? No. Has he asked you to write stories that benefit his business interests? No. Has he offered you money, gifts, expensive dinners in exchange for favorable coverage? I haven't written anything about him. Yet. Ross straightened. But you will. And when you do, we need to know if it's journalism or propaganda for a criminal organization. Madison's hands clenched at her sides. Get out. Excuse me? You heard me. Get out of my apartment. The older agent sighed. Miss Cole, I don't have to talk to you without a lawyer present, and I'm choosing not to. So leave. Ross and his partner exchanged glances. This is a mistake, Ross said quietly. Damian Moretti is dangerous. He uses people. And when they stop being useful, they disappear. He set a business card on her counter. When you're ready to protect yourself instead of him, call me. They left. Madison locked the door behind them and collapsed against it, heart hammering so hard her ribs ached. Her phone rang. Damian, she answered. They were here. I know. His voice was tight with controlled fury. Marcus saw them enter your building. Are you hurt? No, just... They think I'm compromised. They think you're using me. I am using you. The admission came out flat and honest. Not the way they think, but I am. Because being around you makes me feel human, and I'm selfish enough to take that even though it puts you at risk. Madison closed her eyes. Damian, pack a bag. What? Pack a bag. Marcus is on his way. You're staying at my place until this settles. I can't just... You can, and you will. His voice left no room for argument. The FBI knows where you betrayal now. They'll come back. Probably with a warrant next time. I won't let you face that alone. This is exactly what they warned me about. Betrayal. I don't care what they warned you about. Damian's voice dropped lower, dangerous, and possessive. You're mine to protect, Madison. That was the deal. So pack a bag and get in the car when Marcus arrives. We'll figure out the rest later. The word mine did something to Madison's chest she absolutely didn't want to examine. Okay, she whispered. Good. I'll see you soon. He hung up. Madison stood in her apartment for 30 seconds, trying to process what was happening. Then she grabbed a duffel bag and started packing. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later. The drive to Damian's penthouse felt like crossing into enemy territory. Except Madison couldn't tell anymore which side was the enemy. The FBI agents who'd interrogated her in her own home, or the Mafia boss who'd promised to protect her while admitting he was using her? Both, probably. Neither. The elevator doors opened directly into Damian's apartment. He was waiting near the windows, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and controlled as he spoke in what sounded like Italian. When he saw Madison, he ended the call immediately. You came, he said. Did I have a choice? Always. Damian crossed to her and took the duffel bag from her trembling hands. But I'm glad you chose this. Madison looked up at him, at silver eyes that held equal parts concern and something darker. Possession, maybe. Or hunger. They're going to come after me harder now, she said quietly. The FBI. The DA. Everyone who wants to build a case against you. I know. And you still want me here? More than ever. Damian set down her bag and cupped her face with both hands. Gentle, careful, achingly intimate. Because the alternative is watching you face them alone, and I can't do that. Why not? Because I'm falling for you. The confession came out rough, like admitting it physically hurt him. And that means protecting you even when it makes everything more complicated. Madison's breath caught. This was the point of no return, the moment when theoretical danger became concrete reality, when a fake engagement became something neither of them could control, when the lines between protection and possession blurred into something Madison couldn't define. She should pull away, should grab her bag and leave before this destroyed her completely. Instead, she leaned into Damien's touch and whispered, "I'm falling for you too." Damien's eyes darkened. Then he kissed her. Not gentle, not careful, like a man who'd spent weeks holding back and finally couldn't anymore. Madison kissed him back with equal desperation, hands fisting in his shirt, body pressed against his, every logical thought dissolving into heat and need and the terrifying realization that she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. "This is going to get worse before it gets better," he said quietly. "I know. People are going to try to destroy you for being with me. I know, and I'm still not letting you go." Madison's hands tightened on his shirt. "Good." Damien pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Then we face it together." "Together," Madison echoed. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered in afternoon light. A city full of people who had no idea that somewhere in a penthouse overlooking it all, a journalist and a mafia boss had just sealed both their fates. Madison's phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again. Damien pulled away reluctantly and handed her the phone. "Check it." Madison looked at the screen. "Unknown number. Text message. We know you're with him. This is your last chance to cooperate before we start treating you as an accomplice instead of a witness." Agent Ross Madison showed Damien the message. His jaw tightened. "They're bluffing," he said. "Are they?" "Probably." Damien took the phone and deleted the message. "But it doesn't matter, because you're not going anywhere near them without a lawyer present." Damien, no arguments. His eyes held hers with cold certainty. "I've already contacted the best criminal defense attorney in New York. He'll handle any communication with the FBI or the DA's office. You don't speak to them. You don't answer their calls. You don't—" Madison's phone rang. Different number this time. She answered before Damien could stop her. "Hello? Madison Cole?" A man's voice, smooth, professional, vaguely familiar. "Speaking. This is Trevor Wade from the New York Tribune. I'm calling about your relationship with Damien Moretti." Madison's stomach dropped. "How did you get this number?" "Public records." "Listen, I'm working on a story about Moretti's connections to political corruption and organized crime. Multiple sources have confirmed you've been seen with him publicly. I'd love to get your comment on—" Madison hung up. Her hands shook. Damien watched her carefully. "Media?" "New York Tribune. They're writing a story about us." "Of course they are," Damien's voice flattened. "This is what I warned you about. My world doesn't stay private." "I know." Her phone rang again, different number. Then again, and again. Within 5 minutes, Madison had received 7 calls from different area codes. Reporters, tabloid journalists, bloggers who'd somehow gotten her number and wanted comment on her relationship with the most feared mafia boss on the East Coast. Damien took the phone and powered it off. "You're staying here until this dies down," he said. "Not a request." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." Madison looked around the penthouse, at the expensive furniture and the floor-to-ceiling windows and the art that cost more than her entire life savings. "I can't just hide here forever." "You're not hiding. You're letting me protect you while the media circus runs its course." Damien's voice softened slightly. "Please, Madison, let me do this." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle it herself. But looking at Damien's expression, the cold determination mixed with something that looked terrifyingly close to fear, she realized arguing was pointless. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." "Thank you." Damien pulled her close, arms wrapping around her like he could physically shield her from everything outside these walls. "I won't let them hurt you." Madison pressed her face against his chest and tried to believe him. But somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered that the worst hurt wouldn't come from the FBI or the media. It would come from the man holding her. Because Madison was falling for Damian Moretti. And when this inevitably fell apart, when his world collided with hers in ways neither of them could survive, it was going to destroy her completely. Outside, her phone, now powered off and silent, continued receiving messages she'd never read. Warnings from Agent Ross, interview requests from journalists, and one message from an unknown sender that simply read, "He's using you. And when you've outlived your usefulness, he'll dispose of you like everyone else. Run while you still can." But Madison didn't see it. She was too busy falling in love with a man who'd just admitted he'd been falling for her too, and neither of them realized how badly they'd just doomed each other. The FBI field office smelled like burnt coffee and institutional despair. Madison sat in an interrogation room with gray walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, and a two-way mirror that reflected her own exhausted face back at her. She'd been here for 3 hours. No phone, no lawyer, just Agent Ross and his partner sitting across from her with file folders that kept getting thicker every time they opened them. "Let's go through this again," Ross said, voice professionally neutral in the way that made Madison's skin crawl. "You met Damian Moretti 6 months ago during an interview for Manhattan Business Review." "Yes." Madison's throat was raw from repeating the same answers. "I already told you. You used a fake name, Rebecca Lawson." Ross tapped the file. "Why?" "It's a pen name. A lot of freelancers use them." "A pen name or a cover identity?" Ross leaned forward. "Because using false credentials to gain access to a subject under federal investigation could constitute obstruction." Madison's bat clenched beneath the table. "I didn't know he was under investigation." "But you knew who he was." "I knew his name appeared in some reports about organized crime." "Some reports?" Ross's partner, the older agent Madison remembered from her apartment, slid a stack of printed articles across the table. "Try 43 separate news stories in the past 5 years linking Moretti to money laundering, extortion, witness intimidation, and suspected homicides." "You're a journalist, Miss Cole. You expect us to believe you interviewed him without doing basic research?" Madison stared at the articles. Headlines she recognized because she'd read every single one before walking into that interview 6 months ago. "I did my research," she said quietly. "So you knew," Ross said. "You knew exactly who Damian Moretti was, what he'd done, and you interviewed him anyway using a false identity." "It was a corporate profile piece." "It was surveillance," Ross interrupted. "And I think you've been conducting surveillance on Moretti for 6 months, gathering information, building a relationship, getting close enough to access his inner circle." Madison's pulse spiked. "That's not—" "Then what is it?" Ross's voice hardened. "Because from where I'm sitting, you've got 2 options. Either you're working with Moretti as some kind of PR shield to legitimize his operations, or you're investigating him independently and you've gotten in over your head." He paused. "Which is it?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Madison knew the right answer. The safe answer. The answer that would get her out of this room and back to her life. Tell them everything. Cooperate. Testify. Save herself the way Sarah Chen had. But looking at Ross's expression, the cold calculation of a man who didn't care about truth, only about building a case, Madison realized something. They didn't want her cooperation. They wanted her destruction. "I need a lawyer," Madison said. Ross smiled without warmth. "You're not under arrest, Miss Cole. You're here voluntarily." "Then I'm leaving." She stood. Ross's partner moved to block the door. "Sit down," Ross said quietly. "We're not finished." "I invoked my right to counsel." Madison's voice shook but held firm. "Which means this interview is over. You think a lawyer is going to protect you?" Ross leaned back in his chair, studying her like a specimen under glass. "We have photographs of you entering Moretti's building at 11 p.m. and not leaving until the next morning. We have recordings of phone calls between you and known associates of his organization. We have witnesses who've seen you at restaurants, private events, locations that suggest intimate involvement with a criminal enterprise." Madison's stomach dropped. "You've been surveilling me." "We've been surveilling Moretti. You just happened to walk into frame." Ross opened another folder and slid it across the table. This is a subpoena for your testimony before a federal grand jury. You'll receive formal notice within 48 hours. And when you appear, you'll answer every question we ask, under oath, without a lawyer present to coach your responses. That's not how grand jury testimony works. That's exactly how it works. Ross's smile was razor sharp. Your lawyer can sit outside the room, but inside, it's just you, the prosecutors, and 23 jurors deciding whether to indict Damian Moretti based on what you tell them. Madison's hands trembled. I don't know anything worth testifying about. Then it'll be a short testimony. Ross stood. But if we find out you lied under oath to protect him, you'll go to prison for perjury. Minimum 3 years, maximum 15. He let that sink in. Still think you don't need a lawyer? The older agent opened the door. You're free to go, Ross said. For now. But Miss Cole? He waited until she looked at him. Whatever you think you feel for Damian Moretti, it's not real. Men like him don't have relationships. They have assets. And the second you stop being useful, he'll dispose of you like everyone else. Madison walked out on shaking legs. The hallway was fluorescent bright and institutional cold. She found her phone and her bag at the front desk, signed for them with hands that wouldn't stop trembling, and stepped outside into late afternoon air that felt like freedom and threat in equal measure. Her phone buzzed immediately. 17 missed calls, 34 texts, all from unknown numbers except one. Damian, where are you? Madison stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed, FBI field office, just got out. The response was instant. Are you hurt? No, scared. I'm sending Marcus. Don't talk to anyone until he gets there. I already talked to them. How much? Madison's fingers hovered over the keyboard. How much had she told them? Nothing concrete, nothing damaging, but enough that they knew she was vulnerable, enough that they'd decided she was worth pressuring, enough that they're subpoenaing me for grand jury testimony. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, we need to talk, face to face, not at my place, not at yours, somewhere safe. Is anywhere safe anymore? Meet me at the location Marcus gives you. 1 hour, please, Madison. The please broke something in her chest. Okay. A black Mercedes pulled up to the curb 30 seconds later. Marcus stepped out, face grim. Miss Cole. Madison got in without arguing. They drove through Manhattan in silence. Madison watched the city pass outside the window. People living normal lives, unaware that somewhere in a federal building, agents were building a case that would destroy everything she'd stupidly let herself care about. The car stopped in front of a building Madison didn't recognize. Older construction, residential, nondescript in the way that screamed safe house to anyone who'd watched enough crime dramas. Marcus opened her door. 5th floor, apartment 5C. Madison climbed cracked concrete stairs that smelled like old cigarettes and regret. Found 5C. Knocked. Damian opened the door immediately. He looked different. Still the expensive clothes, still the controlled power, but something in his expression had cracked. He looked like a man who'd spent the past 3 hours imagining worst-case scenarios and finding them all equally unbearable. Come in, he said. The apartment was sparse. Minimal furniture, no personal items. The kind of place designed to be abandoned without leaving traces. This is one of your safe houses, Madison said. One of several. Damian closed the door and engaged 3 separate locks. Nobody knows about this location except Marcus and me. We can talk freely here. Madison set down her bag and turned to face him. They're going to make me testify. I know. They have surveillance, photos, recordings. They know I've been staying with you. I know. Damian's jaw tightened. What did you tell them? Nothing. I invoked my right to counsel before they could ask real questions. Madison's hands clenched. But they're not going to stop. They're going to subpoena me, put me in front of a grand jury and ask questions I can't answer without either perjuring myself or destroying you. Then you perjure yourself. Madison's breath caught. What? You lie. Damian said it simply, like he was suggesting she order coffee. Under oath. To the grand jury. You tell them we're casual acquaintances, that you interviewed me once and occasionally see me socially. Nothing intimate. Nothing that suggests deep involvement. That's a felony. That's survival. Damian stepped closer. because the truth will get you indicted as an accomplice. They'll claim you knowingly assisted criminal activity by maintaining a relationship with me. They'll destroy your life to get to mine. So your solution is I commit perjury and go to prison for that instead? My solution is you lie convincingly enough that they can't prove it's perjury. His eyes held hers with cold certainty. I'll provide documentation showing we barely know each other. Fake correspondence, false timelines, witnesses who will testify we've met maybe twice in 6 months. Madison's stomach turned. You're asking me to construct an entire false narrative. I'm asking you to protect yourself using the same tactics they're using to destroy you. Damien's voice dropped lower. This is my world, Madison. This is how survival works. You don't tell the truth. You tell the version of truth that keeps you alive. I can't. Yes, you can. He cupped her face with both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Because the alternative is you tell the truth, they indict you as an accomplice, and you spend the next 5 years in federal prison while I spend the next 20. Is that what you want? No? Then lie. The word came out harsh and desperate. Lie to them. Lie to the grand jury. Lie to everyone except me. Madison pulled away from his touch. And what happens when they catch me in the lie? Because they will, Damien. They've been building this case for months. They have evidence I haven't even seen yet. The second I commit perjury, they'll tear apart my testimony and prove I lied. Not if the lie is good enough. There is no lie good enough, Madison's voice cracked. They have photos of me entering your building at night and leaving the next morning. They have recordings of phone calls. They probably have surveillance footage of us at Maria, at your penthouse, at every location we've been together. How am I supposed to lie about that? Damien's expression went cold. Then we disappear. What? Both of us. Tonight. I have resources in place for exactly this scenario. New identities, offshore accounts, properties in countries with no extradition treaties. His voice was ice. We leave the country before the subpoena is formally served. We disappear so completely the FBI will spend years searching and never find us. Madison stared at him. You're talking about running. I'm talking about surviving. By abandoning everything? My career? My family? My entire life? Your career is already gone, Damien said bluntly. Your family thinks you're a criminal. Your life as Madison Cole is over the second that subpoena gets served. The only question is whether you go down with it or you start over somewhere else. With you. Yes. As what? Your accomplice? Your possession? Another Sarah Chen waiting to be disposed of when I stop being useful? Damien's jaw tightened. I told you Sarah is alive. You told me a lot of things. Madison's voice rose. You told me I had a choice. You told me you'd let me walk away if I wanted. You told me this thing between us was real. But the second things get difficult, your solution is I commit perjury or flee the country. Those aren't choices, Damien. Those are ultimatums. What do you want me to say? Damien's control finally cracked. That I have a magic solution that lets you keep your integrity and your freedom while the federal government is actively trying to destroy both? I don't. This is the reality. You're in my world now, and my world doesn't care about moral high ground. It cares about survival. Then maybe I shouldn't be in your world. The words tore out of Madison before she could stop them. Silence. Damien looked like she'd physically struck him. Is that what you want? He asked quietly. To walk away? Madison's chest heaved. I don't know what I want anymore. 3 weeks ago, I was a struggling freelancer trying to survive a family reunion. Now I'm facing federal indictment because I was stupid enough to fall for someone who operates outside every moral boundary I've ever had. I never lied about who I was. No, you just made me fall in love with you anyway. The confession exploded out of Madison like a gunshot. You made me care about you. You made me believe this thing between us was real. And now you're asking me to throw away everything I am to protect you from consequences you created. Damien's expression shifted. Pain and hope, and something that looked terrifyingly close to desperation. You love me, he said. That's what you heard? Not the part about how you're destroying my life? You love me, he repeated, stepping closer. Say it again. Damien, say it. His hands came up to frame her face, grip gentle but insistent. Because I've spent 3 hours terrified the FBI convinced you I'm a monster, that you'd walk away and never look back, that I'd lost the only person who's ever seen me as human. His voice cracked. So say it again. Tell me I didn't imagine it. Madison's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. I love you, and I hate myself for it. Damien kissed her, desperate and possessive and achingly tender all at once, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her before she disappeared. Madison kissed him back because she was weak and foolish and completely doomed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien pressed his forehead against hers. I love you too, he whispered, which is why I need you to trust me when I say running is the only option that keeps you safe. Running makes me guilty. Staying makes you dead. His voice was flat and certain. The FBI doesn't want your testimony, Madison. They want leverage. They want me desperate enough to make mistakes. And the fastest way to make me desperate is to threaten the one person I actually care about. Madison's blood went cold. What are you saying? I'm saying someone leaked your location to the media outside my building this afternoon. Someone made sure cameras were there when the FBI picked you up. Someone is orchestrating this entire situation to maximum public damage. Damien pulled back enough to meet her eyes. This isn't standard procedure. This is targeted destruction. And I need to figure out who's behind it before they escalate to actual violence. Violence against who? You. The word hung between them like a death sentence. Madison's hand started shaking. The FBI didn't send those documents about Sarah Chen, Damien interrupted. Someone else did. Someone who knew exactly what evidence would destroy your trust in me. Someone who's playing a much bigger game than federal prosecution. Who? I don't know yet. His expression went cold. But I'm going to find out. Madison's phone buzzed. She pulled it out with trembling hands. Email notification. Sender. A friend. Subject. Final warning. Her stomach dropped as she opened it. A single photograph. Madison and Damien kissing in the safe house apartment, taken from outside the window, taken 3 minutes ago. Below the photo, a single line of text. You had your chance to walk away. Now it's too late. Check the news. Madison's hands went numb. She opened her browser and searched her own name. The top result made her vision blur. Breaking. FBI sources. Confirm Madison Cole. Under investigation for conspiracy to obstruct justice. The article was dated 11 minutes ago. No, Madison whispered. No, no, no. Damien took the phone from her shaking hands, read the article, and his expression went murderous. They leaked it, he said flatly. They told the press you're under investigation before they even formally indicted you. Why would they? To destroy your credibility before you can defend yourself. Damien's voice was cold fury. Now anything you say will be dismissed as lies from a desperate accomplice. Any testimony you give will be worthless because they've already convicted you in the court of public opinion. Madison's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the worn couch, chest heaving, mind spiraling into panic so complete she couldn't breathe. This was it, the complete destruction Ross had warned her about. Her career was gone. Her reputation was gone. Her freedom was about to be gone. And all because she'd been stupid enough to fall in love with a man the world considered a monster. Damien knelt in front of her, hands gripping her shoulders. Look at me, he commanded. Madison, look at me. She forced her eyes to focus on his face. We're leaving, he said, but tonight, within the hour. I have a private jet fueled and waiting at Teterboro. We'll be in the air before the formal indictment gets filed. By tomorrow morning, we'll be somewhere the FBI can't touch us. Running makes me look guilty. You're already guilty in their eyes, Damien's voice was steel. This leak proves that. They're not interested in justice. They're interested in destroying you to get to me. So we remove you from the equation entirely. Madison's chest constricted. What about my mother? My family? I'll make sure they're protected. Protected how? By your armed guards? By becoming targets themselves? Her voice cracked. Everyone I care about becomes collateral damage in your world, Damien. That's what you're not understanding. This isn't just about me anymore. Then what do you want me to do? The desperation in his voice nearly broke her. Tell me what you need and I'll make it happen. Money? Resources? I'll relocate your entire family to somewhere safe if that's what it takes. I need you to let me go. Silence. Damien looked like she'd shot him. "What?" he whispered. "Let me go." Madison's tears finally spilled over. "Stop protecting me. Stop trying to save me. Let me walk out of here and face whatever's coming without dragging you down with me. I'm not letting you face this alone. You have to." Her hands gripped his wrists, holding on even as she tried to push him away. "Because if I stay with you, we both go down. But if I walk away now, if I cooperate with the FBI, if I give them everything they want about your operations, maybe they'll offer immunity. Maybe I can survive this." "By betraying me." Damien's voice went flat and cold. "By saving myself." Madison forced the words out, the way Sarah Chen did, the way anyone with self-preservation instinct would. Damien stood abruptly, backing away like she'd become toxic. "So that's it," he said. "That's your decision. You're going to testify against me." "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do." His control finally shattered completely. "You have the choice to trust me, to believe that I will protect you, to accept that running is survival instead of cowardice. But you'd rather destroy us both than live with the guilt of choosing me over your moral high ground. That's not fair. None of this is fair." Damien's voice filled the small apartment. "I fell in love with you knowing exactly how dangerous it was, knowing it would make me weak, knowing it would give my enemies the perfect weapon to use against me. And I did it anyway because for the first time in 15 years, I wanted something more than power." He stopped, breathing hard. "But you're right. You should walk away. Because I can't protect someone who's already decided I'm the monster they should be running from." Madison stood on shaking legs. "Damien, get out. Please, just listen. I said get out." The words came out raw and broken. "Before I do something I'll regret. Before I lock you in a room and drag you onto that plane whether you want it or not. Before I become the actual monster you're so afraid of." Madison grabbed her bag with trembling hands, walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the lock. "I'm sorry," she whispered without turning around. "No, you're not." Damien's voice was ice. "You're relieved, because now you get to walk away with your integrity intact while I burn alone." Madison opened the door, stepped into the hallway. The door slammed shut behind her with brutal finality. She made it down 2 flights of stairs before her legs gave out completely, collapsed on a landing that smelled like mildew and broken promises, pressed her face against her knees, and finally let herself break. Her phone buzzed. Text message from a blocked number. "Smart choice. Report to the FBI field office tomorrow at 9 a.m. Ask for Agent Ross. He'll discuss immunity arrangements in exchange for your full cooperation. Welcome to the winning side." Madison stared at the message through blurred vision. This should feel like victory, like survival, like making the right choice to save herself from destruction. Instead, it felt like she'd just murdered the only person who'd ever actually seen her. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a news alert. Developing. Damien Moretti's penthouse, raided by FBI and coordinated operation. Madison's stomach dropped. They were moving against him, right now, while he was vulnerable and distracted by her betrayal. She'd just handed them the perfect opportunity. Her hands shook as she pulled up another news site. Different headline. Sources confirm Madison Cole negotiating immunity deal in exchange for testimony against Moretti. They'd leaked that too, before she'd even made the decision, before she'd even agreed to cooperate. Someone had decided her fate hours ago and just waited for her to realize she had no other option. Madison's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered numbly. "Hello? Madison Cole?" A woman's voice. Cold, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes. This is your final warning. Stop cooperating with federal authorities. Stop trusting Agent Ross. And most importantly, stop believing the FBI is trying to help you." Who is this? Someone who knows the real game being played here, and someone who's trying to save your life before you testify yourself into a grave. A pause. Agent Ross isn't building a case against Damien Moretti. He's building a case against you. The immunity deal is fake. The cooperation agreement is a trap. And if you walk into that field office tomorrow morning, you will be arrested for conspiracy, racketeering, and accessory to multiple federal crimes. Madison's blood turned to ice. That's not... Check your email. I'm sending you the actual indictment Ross plans to file. Your name is listed as a co-conspirator in 17 separate charges. Damien's name appears exactly twice. The woman's voice softened slightly. He was never the target, Madison. You were. From the beginning. Everything that's happened, the leaked photos, the media circus, the pressure to testify, was designed to make you desperate enough to walk into a trap disguised as immunity. Why would they? Because someone paid them to. Someone who wants Damien Moretti isolated and vulnerable. And the fastest way to accomplish that is to remove the one person he actually cares about. The line crackled. I'm sending you coordinates. A car will pick you up in 10 minutes. Get in it. Trust nothing else. Who are you? Madison demanded. Sarah Chen. And unlike Damien, I actually did disappear into witness protection, which means I know exactly what the FBI does to witnesses who stop being useful. The line went dead. Madison stared at her phone in numb horror as an email notification appeared. PDF attachment. Legal document. She opened it with shaking hands. United States District Court, Southern District of New York, USA, versus Madison. Elizabeth Cole. Indictment. Count 1. Conspiracy to commit money laundering. Count 2. Conspiracy to obstruct justice. Count 3. Acting as an unregistered agent. 17 counts total, each carrying 5 to 20 years in federal prison. Madison's vision blurred as she scrolled through page after page of charges that painted her not as a witness, but as Damien's active accomplice in criminal operations she'd never even known existed. Her phone buzzed. Text message. Coordinates. Address 3 blocks away. Car is waiting. Black SUV. License plate 7XM4891. You have 8 minutes before Ross realizes you're not at your apartment and sends agents to collect you. Madison stood on shaking legs. Every instinct screamed that this was another trap, another manipulation, another lie designed to push her deeper into a world she couldn't escape. But looking at the indictment on her screen, at 17 federal charges that would destroy her life regardless of whether she cooperated, Madison realized something. She was already trapped. The only question was which trap would kill her faster. 7 minutes. Madison ran. Down cracked stairs. Out a side exit. Through alleys that smelled like garbage and desperation. Her heels caught on broken pavement, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The coordinates led to a parking garage entrance. A black SUV sat idling near the barrier, license plate matching the text. Madison approached on trembling legs. The rear door opened. A woman sat inside. Asian features, late 30s, tired eyes that had seen things Madison couldn't imagine. Get in, Sarah Chen said, before they find you. Madison got in. The door closed. The SUV pulled out into traffic with practiced ease. Madison's chest heaved as she tried to process what was happening. The indictment is real, Sarah said without preamble. Ross has been building a case against you for 3 months, since before you even met Damien at that family reunion. That's impossible. Someone paid him to. Sarah's voice was flat. Someone who knew Damien would eventually try to pursue a real relationship. Someone who positioned you perfectly to be manipulated into exactly this scenario. Someone who's been playing a much longer game than anyone realized. Madison's throat closed. Who? I don't know yet, but I know they're dangerous enough to corrupt a federal agent, smart enough to orchestrate media leaks with perfect timing, and ruthless enough to destroy an innocent woman's life just to isolate Damien Moretti. Sarah met Madison's eyes in the rearview mirror. You're not collateral damage, Madison. You're the weapon they've been sharpening for months, and they're about to use you to cut Damien's throat. Then what do I do? You disappear. Sarah handed her a manila envelope. New identity, new passport, bank account with enough money to start over somewhere the FBI can't find you. I'll have you out of the country before midnight. What about Damien? What about him? Sarah's voice hardened. He survived worse than losing you. He'll survive this too. The question is whether you will. Madison stared at the envelope in her hands. Inside was everything she needed to escape, to start over, to survive. All she had to do was abandon Damien completely and permanently. Leave him to face his enemies alone, while she disappeared into a life that wasn't hers, become exactly what Ross had accused her of being, a coward who saved herself by sacrificing the man she loved. Or she could throw away the envelope, walk back into that safe house, and face whatever was coming with Damien beside her. Even if it meant going to prison, even if it meant losing everything, even if it meant destroying them both. Madison's hands trembled as she stared at the envelope, the choice that would define the rest of her life. Run and survive alone, or stay and burn together. Outside the SUV windows, Manhattan blurred past in smears of light and shadow, a city that didn't care which choice she made, didn't care if she lived or died, didn't care that somewhere in a safe house apartment, a man who'd just admitted he loved her was probably tearing himself apart, wondering if she'd meant it when she said she loved him too. "I need to make a call," Madison whispered. "No calls," Sarah said firmly. "They're monitoring everything. The second you contact anyone, they'll triangulate your location. I don't care." Madison pulled out her phone. "I need to talk to him." "Madison, please." Her voice cracked. "Just one call. Then I'll decide." Sarah's expression softened with something that looked like pity. "Make it fast," she said. Madison dialed Damien's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then his voice, rough and guarded. "Madison, it's me," she whispered. Silence. Then, "Where are you?" "I don't know. Somewhere in Manhattan. Sarah Chen picked me up. She says the immunity deal is fake, that Ross is going to arrest me tomorrow instead of offering protection." "I know." Damien's voice was hollow. "Marcus found the indictment 10 minutes ago. I was about to call you." "To warn me?" "To tell you I'm sorry." He exhaled slowly. "You were right to walk away. This world destroys everything good that touches it, and you deserved better than what I could give you." Madison's eyes burned. "What if I don't want better? What if I just want you?" "Then you're making a mistake that'll cost you everything." "I know." Her hand shook around the phone. "But I'm tired of running from mistakes. I'm tired of protecting myself by staying small and safe and alone. And I'm really tired of pretending I don't love you enough to burn for it." Damien's breath caught audibly. "Madison, where are you right now?" she interrupted. "The safe house. Waiting for Marcus to bring exit documents so I can disappear before the raid expands." "Stay there," Madison said. "I'm coming back." "No, I'm coming back," she repeated, voice stronger. "And we're leaving together, tonight. Both of us or neither of us. That's my choice." "They'll hunt you forever." "Then let them." Madison's voice broke. "Because I'd rather spend the rest of my life running with you than spend it safe and alone wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to stay." Silence. Then Damien's voice, rough with emotion Madison had never heard from him before. "Are you sure?" "No," Madison admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway. The FBI will charge you with fleeing prosecution. I don't care. Your family will think you're guilty. I don't care. You'll lose everything you are to become someone you're not." "I already lost everything," Madison interrupted, "the second I fell in love with you, so we might as well lose it together." She could hear Damien's shaky breath through the phone. "Okay," he whispered. "Come back. We'll figure out the rest together. I'll be there in 10 minutes. "Madison?" "Yes?" "I love you." He said it like a confession and a prayer and a promise, all at once. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you don't regret this choice." "I already regret it," Madison said, "but I'm choosing it anyway." She hung up, looked at Sarah in the rearview mirror. "Take me back to the safe house," Madison said. Sarah's expression was unreadable. "You're making a mistake. I know." Madison's hands were steady now. "But it's my mistake to make." The SUV turned around, headed back toward the building where Damien waited, where federal agents might already be surrounding, where Madison's old life would end and something new, dangerous, terrifying, impossible, would begin. Madison stared out the window at the city she was about to leave forever, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of burning, because she'd finally found something worth burning for. The SUV stopped 3 blocks from the safe house. Sarah turned in her seat, eyes hard with the kind of professional assessment that came from years of calculated survival. "Last chance to change your mind," she said. Once you walk back in there, there's no immunity deal, no witness protection, no second chances. Madison's hands gripped the envelope containing her escape route, the fake passport, the bank account numbers, the carefully constructed identity that could have saved her life. She tore it in half. "I'm done running from things that scare me," Madison said. Sarah's expression shifted, something between respect and pity. "Then you're braver than I was, or stupider, hard to tell which. Probably both." Madison opened the door. "Thank you for trying. Don't thank me yet." Sarah pulled out a burner phone and handed it to Madison. "Keep this. If things go wrong, and they will, call the number programmed in there. I'll have one extraction window. After that, you're on your own." Madison took the phone. "Why are you helping me?" "Because Damien saved my daughter's life when the people I testified against tried to kill her." Sarah's voice flattened. "I owe him, and despite what the media says, he's not the monster they want everyone to believe." She paused. "But he's still dangerous. Remember that when you're deciding how much to trust him." Madison nodded and stepped out into cold November air that smelled like exhaust and distant rain. The SUV pulled away, leaving her alone on a street corner 3 blocks from a decision that would define the rest of her life. Madison started walking. Every step felt like moving through water. Her heart slammed against her ribs hard enough to bruise. Somewhere behind her, federal agents were probably triangulating her phone's location, preparing raids, building cases that would bury her under decades of prison time. Ahead of her, Damien waited in a safe house that might already be surrounded. Both options ended in destruction. Madison chose destruction with him over safety alone. The safe house building loomed ahead, 5 stories of cracked brick and rusted fire escapes that screamed, "Nothing important happens here," to anyone not looking closely enough. Madison climbed the stairs on trembling legs. 5th floor, apartment 5C. She knocked. The door opened before her knuckles left the wood. Damien stood there looking like he'd aged 5 years in 30 minutes. His shirt was half unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up, hair disheveled from what looked like repeated attempts to drag his hands through it. Silver eyes that had been cold and controlled this morning now burned with something raw and desperate. "You came back," he said, voice rough. "I told you I would. People lie." He pulled her inside and locked the 3 deadbolts with shaking hands. Especially when telling the truth costs everything. Madison watched him engage the security measures with the kind of practiced efficiency that suggested he'd done this before. Prepared for raids, planned escapes, survived situations that would have destroyed normal people. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Marcus says 30 minutes before the raid expands to include this location. Maybe less if they're tracking your phone." Damien turned to face her fully. "Which they probably are, so give it to me." Madison handed over her phone. Damien opened the window and threw it into the alley 4 stories below. The screen shattered against concrete with a sound like breaking bones. "That was my entire life," Madison said. "Your entire life is standing in this room, deciding whether to trust me." Damien crossed to a duffel bag sitting near the door and pulled out 2 passports. New identities, matching documentation, bank accounts with enough money to disappear for years if we're careful. He handed her one. "Rachel Morgan, Canadian citizen, corporate consultant, completely clean background." Madison opened the passport and stared at her own face above a name that meant nothing. "Who am I running from?" she asked. "The FBI? Or whoever's been orchestrating this whole thing?" "Both." Damien pulled out his phone, not the one he'd been using, a different burner, and showed her a photo. "This is the man who paid Agent Ross to build a case against you instead of me." The photo showed a gray-haired man in an expensive suit standing outside what looked like a federal courthouse. Distinguished, professional, completely unremarkable, except for the cold calculation in his eyes. "I don't know him," Madison said. "Victor Castellanos, federal prosecutor. 20-year career convicting organized crime figures with a 93% success rate." Damien's voice went flat. "He's also been on my family's payroll for the past decade, feeding us information about ongoing investigations in exchange for money that's made him very wealthy and very untouchable." Madison's stomach dropped. "You corrupted a federal prosecutor?" "My father corrupted him. I inherited the arrangement when I took over the organization 8 years ago." Damien set down the phone. Victor has protected me from 17 separate federal investigations, made evidence disappear, buried witnesses, destroyed cases before they could reach grand juries. Then why is he coming after me now? Because 3 months ago, I told him I wanted out. Damien's jaw tightened. I wanted to dismantle the criminal operations, go legitimate, cut ties with everyone who'd helped me build the empire, including him. And he didn't take it well. He told me I couldn't leave until I'd fulfilled certain obligations I'd apparently inherited from my father that I'd never been told about. Damien's expression darkened. When I refused, he said I'd regret it. 2 weeks later, you hired that escort service for your family reunion. Madison's blood went cold. He knew about the service because you own it. He knew about it because he's the one who made sure your request got escalated to me personally instead of going to one of the professional actors. Damien moved to the window and stared out at the street below. Victor positioned you perfectly. He knew I'd remember you from the interview. He knew I'd be curious enough to show up myself. He knew if I spent any time with you at all, I'd want more. So this whole thing, the reunion, the helicopter, everything that's happened since, that was all planned? Not planned. Manipulated. Damien turned back to face her. Victor didn't create our relationship. He just made sure we collided at exactly the right moment for maximum damage. Then he sat back and waited for me to care about you enough that destroying you would destroy me too. Madison's hands clenched. Why not just kill you directly? Because killing me makes me a martyr, makes my organization rally around revenge, creates instability that draws federal attention Victor can't control. Damien's smile was cold. But discrediting me? Making me look weak? Proving I'd sacrifice my empire for a woman? That destroys me from the inside. Makes my own people question my leadership. Gives Victor the excuse he needs to dismantle everything I've built and absorb the profitable pieces for himself. He's not actually a prosecutor, is he? He is. He's just also the criminal he's supposed to be prosecuting. Damien pulled out another phone. How many did he have? And showed Madison a series of financial records. Victor Castellanos owned shell companies in 7 countries, offshore accounts worth an estimated $200 million, real estate holdings that generate enough passive income to fund a small army. Madison scrolled through the evidence with numb hands. This is enough to put him away for life. If anyone believed it came from a legitimate source instead of from me, Damien's voice was bitter. But I'm a known criminal. My testimony is worthless in court. Any evidence I provide will be dismissed as fabricated revenge against a prosecutor who got too close to the truth. Then what do we do with it? We use it as leverage. Damien took back the phone. We make Victor understand that if he destroys you, I'll burn his entire empire to the ground. Consequences be damned. That's mutually assured destruction. That's survival. Damien stepped closer, eyes burning with intensity that made Madison's breath catch. Victor thinks he can use you as a weapon against me. I'm going to prove he's wrong by showing him I'm willing to sacrifice everything, my freedom, my organization, my life, to keep you safe. Damien, that's insane. I know. He cupped her face with both hands. But I told you I'd burn my empire for you, and I meant it. Madison's chest constricted. There has to be another way. There isn't. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Victor won't stop until one of us is destroyed. The only question is which one. And I've already decided it's going to be him. How? Damien pulled away and crossed to a laptop sitting on the apartment's single table. Victor's greatest weakness is the same as mine used to be. He thinks he's untouchable. He thinks his position as a federal prosecutor makes him immune to consequences. He thinks wrong. He turned the laptop to show Madison a video file. What is this? She asked. Security footage from Victor's office 3 weeks ago. Watch. Madison hit play. The video showed Victor Castellanos sitting behind a desk, speaking with someone off camera. No audio, but body language suggested a business transaction. Victor pulled out an envelope, handed it to whoever he was meeting, received something in return that looked like a flash drive. The camera angle shifted. The person Victor was meeting came into frame. Agent Ross. Madison's stomach dropped. They're working together. They've been working together for years. Damien's voice was ice. Ross feeds Victor information about ongoing federal investigations. Victor pays him in cash and protection from internal affairs reviews. It's a beautiful arrangement that's kept them both wealthy and powerful. Until you decided to go legitimate and threatened to expose them. Exactly. Damien closed the laptop. So Victor created a scenario where exposing him would also destroy you. He thought that would be enough leverage to keep me silent. Was he right? Damien looked at her with eyes that held something terrifyingly close to devotion. 3 weeks ago, yes, before I really knew you, before I understood what losing you would mean, I probably would have backed down to keep you safe. And now? Now I'd rather watch the world burn than let him take you from me. His voice dropped lower. So we're going to give Victor a choice. He drops the investigation into you, destroys the fabricated indictment, and disappears from our lives permanently. Or I release this footage along with every financial record, every corrupt transaction, every piece of evidence proving he's been running a criminal empire from inside the federal prosecutor's office. Madison's pulse hammered. He'll never agree to that. He will when he realizes the alternative is spending the rest of his life in the same prisons he's spent 20 years filling. Damien pulled out yet another phone. I'm calling him now. You're going to listen to every word, and then you're going to decide if you still want to run with me after hearing exactly what kind of monster I become when someone threatens what's mine. Damien, he was already dialing. The phone rang twice before a smooth, professional voice answered. Moretti, I was wondering when you'd call. Victor. Damien's voice could have frozen steel. We need to discuss Madison Cole. Do we? Victor sounded amused. Because from where I'm sitting, there's nothing to discuss. She's been indicted on 17 federal charges. She'll be arrested within 24 hours, and you'll watch the woman you foolishly fell for disappear into a prison system where I have more influence than you could possibly imagine. You fabricated the indictment. I built a legitimate case using evidence your relationship with her provided. Victor's voice hardened. She's guilty, Damien, of conspiracy, of obstruction, of knowingly assisting your criminal operations by maintaining an intimate relationship with you while you're under federal investigation. She didn't know I was under investigation. Ignorance isn't a defense, and besides, we both know she's smarter than that. She interviewed you 6 months ago using a false identity. She knew exactly who you were, which makes her either a co-conspirator or an undercover investigator. Victor paused. Either way, she's mine now. Damien's hands tightened around the phone. I have evidence of your corruption, financial records, video footage, proof you've been running a criminal enterprise from inside the prosecutor's office for years. Silence. Then Victor laughed, cold and genuinely amused. And who would believe that evidence coming from you? You're a known criminal, Damien. Your testimony is worthless. Any evidence you provide will be dismissed as fabricated revenge. Not if it comes from Madison. The laughter stopped. Excuse me? Victor's voice went dangerously quiet. Madison Cole, investigative journalist with a reputation for exposing corruption. If she publishes the evidence showing you're corrupt, if she writes a story documenting every transaction, every payoff, every crime you've committed while pretending to prosecute criminals, people will believe her. Damien's smile was savage. Because unlike me, she has credibility. And you just gave her the perfect motivation to destroy you by threatening to put her in prison for crimes she didn't commit. She'll never— She's standing right here, Damien interrupted, listening to every word, deciding right now whether to run with me or stay and fight you, and I think we both know which option she's going to choose. Madison's heart slammed against her ribs. This was it, the moment Damien had been building toward, the choice he'd engineered to give her power in a situation designed to leave her powerless. Victor could destroy her with a fabricated indictment, but she could destroy him with the truth. Mutually assured destruction, except one of them was actually guilty. Put her on the phone, Victor said quietly. Damien looked at Madison, silent question in his eyes. She took the phone. Hello, Victor, Madison said, voice steadier than she felt. Miss Cole. Victor's tone shifted. Professional, almost sympathetic. You're making a terrible mistake. Damien Moretti is using you as a weapon against me. Once you've served your purpose, he'll dispose of you the same way he's disposed of everyone else who got too close. Like Sarah Chen? Exactly like Sarah Chen. Victor's voice hardened. Do you know what really happened to her? Not the pretty story Damien told you about witness protection and new identities. The truth. Madison's throat tightened. Tell me. Sarah Chen testified against Damien's organization, provided evidence that should have sent him to prison for 20 years. But the evidence mysteriously disappeared before trial. Witnesses recanted. The case collapsed. Victor paused. Sarah went into witness protection not because Damien arranged it, but because she was terrified he'd kill her for betraying him. She's been in hiding for 3 years. Alone, afraid, destroyed by the same man who's currently promising to protect you. That's not what she told me. She told you what Damien paid her to tell you. Victor's voice dropped lower. He controls her, Madison. He controls everyone. And if you align yourself with him against me, you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder wondering when he'll decide you're too dangerous to keep alive. Madison looked at Damien. He stood perfectly still, expression unreadable, waiting to see if she'd believe Victor's version over his. You're lying, Madison said into the phone. Am I? Victor sounded genuinely curious. Then ask Damien what happened to the last journalist who investigated him. Ask him what happened to Rebecca Lawson, the identity you used to interview him. Ask him if that was really just a coincidence that you chose the same name as a woman who disappeared 2 years ago after getting too close to the truth about his operations. Madison's blood went cold. She looked at Damien. Rebecca Lawson was a real person? Damien's jaw tightened. Yes. What happened to her? She was an investigative journalist for the Tribune. She spent 6 months building a case against my organization, got close to people I worked with, convinced them to talk, built evidence that should have buried me. His voice flattened. Then she disappeared. Did you kill her? No. Damien's eyes held hers without flinching. One of my competitors did, because she'd also been investigating them, and they decided she was too dangerous to let live. I found out 3 days too late to save her. But you didn't tell the police. I told her family. Damien's expression was granite. I gave them enough information to understand what happened and why. I made sure the people responsible paid for it, and I've spent 2 years making sure no other journalist ends up the same way by discouraging anyone from investigating too deeply. By threatening them? By warning them. His voice was steel. There's a difference. Victor's laugh crackled through the phone. Do you hear how he justifies murder, Madison? How he makes violence sound like protection? That's what he'll do to you eventually. Twist the truth until you can't tell the difference between safety and captivity. Madison's hands shook. What do you want, Victor? I want you to walk away from Damien Moretti. Right now. Today. I'll drop the fabricated indictment. Destroy the evidence against you. Give you your life back. His voice softened with false sympathy. All you have to do is walk out that door and never look back. And if I don't, then I'll make sure you spend the next 20 years in federal prison watching Damien build a new empire while you rot in a cell for crimes you actually didn't commit. Victor's voice went cold. Your choice, Miss Cole. Freedom or loyalty. You can't have both. Madison looked at Damien, at silver eyes that held desperation and devotion, and the terrible certainty that whatever she chose right now would define both their futures. I choose loyalty, Madison said. Victor's silence was deafening. Then, you're making a fatal mistake. Probably. Madison's voice was steady now. But it's my mistake to make, and I'm done letting people like you tell me what choices I'm allowed to have. Then you've sealed your fate. Victor's professional mask cracked completely. I'll destroy you, Madison Cole. I'll destroy Damien, and I'll make sure everyone who ever cared about either of you understands exactly what happens to people who cross me. Try it, Madison said, and I'll publish every piece of evidence Damien's given me. I'll write a story documenting every corrupt transaction you've made. I'll expose you as the criminal you've been prosecuting for 20 years, and I'll make sure your name becomes synonymous with everything wrong with the justice system you've spent your career pretending to protect. She hung up. The silence in the apartment was absolute. Madison's hands trembled as she set down the phone. That was either the bravest thing I've ever witnessed, Damien said quietly, or the stupidest. I'm genuinely not sure which. Both, Madison whispered. Definitely both. Damien crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. Not gentle, not careful, just desperate and fierce and achingly real. I'm going to protect you, he said into her hair. Whatever it takes. Whoever I have to destroy. You're mine now. And I don't let go of what's mine. Madison pressed her face against his chest and tried to stop shaking. What happens now? Now we run. Damien pulled back enough to meet her eyes. We have maybe 15 minutes before Victor mobilizes every resource he has to find us. We get to the airport, we get on that plane. We disappear before he can stop us. And then? Then we figure out how to destroy him from a distance. Damien's smile was cold. Because Victor made a fatal mistake. He threatened you. And I've built my entire empire on making examples of people who threaten what belongs to me. A phone buzzed. Not Damien's burner. Not the one Madison had used to call him. The one Sarah had given her. Madison pulled it out with shaking hands. Text message from an unknown number. Victor just activated a kill team. 6 professionals. Former military. They're heading to your location now. You have maybe 8 minutes. Marcus can't reach you in time. The only exit is the fire escape facing the alley. Go now. Madison showed Damien the message. His expression went from controlled to lethal in half a second. How does Sarah know? Madison started. Doesn't matter. Damien grabbed the duffel bag and threw it over his shoulder. We're leaving. He pulled Madison toward the window. Sirens erupted outside. Boss. Close, getting closer. Not police sirens. Something else. Damien looked out and his face went pale. That's not the kill team. That's... The apartment door exploded inward, not kicked, not forced, blown apart by shaped charges that turned solid wood into shrapnel. Smoke filled the room. Through it came Agent Ross and 4 tactical agents in full combat gear, weapons raised, expressions cold and professional and absolutely final. Damien Moretti, Ross's voice cut through the chaos. Madison Cole. You're both under arrest for conspiracy to obstruct justice, fleeing prosecution and accessory to federal crimes. Get on the ground, hands behind your heads, now. Damien moved to shield Madison with his body. Don't, Ross said quietly, weapon aimed at Damien's chest. I will shoot you if you make me, and I'd really prefer not to do the paperwork. Madison's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. This was it. The end. 8 minutes had become 8 seconds, and they'd lost. Damien's hands slowly moved away from Madison. Then he said something in Italian, fast, urgent, directed at someone Madison couldn't see. The window behind them shattered, not from gunfire, from Marcus crashing through it from the fire escape, moving with the kind of brutal efficiency that came from decades of military training. He hit the first tactical agent before anyone could react, disarming him with movements so fast Madison's eyes couldn't track them. Chaos erupted. Ross turned his weapon toward Marcus. Damien moved, not toward Ross, toward Madison. He grabbed her, spun her toward the shattered window, and shoved her through it with enough force to send her sprawling onto the fire escape. Go, he shouted. Down the fire escape. Don't stop. Marcus will cover you. I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice. Damien's eyes burned with something beyond desperation. If they take you, Victor wins. So you run. You survive. You tell the world what he did. You make sure my death means something. Your death? Gunfire exploded inside the apartment. Madison screamed. Marcus appeared in the window, bleeding from a shoulder wound but still moving. Go, Miss Cole! Now! He shoved her toward the fire escape stairs. Madison ran. Down rusted metal stairs that shook under her feet. Down past windows where faces appeared and disappeared, residents too smart to get involved. Down 4 stories while gunfire echoed above and her heart tried to tear itself out of her chest. She hit the alley running. Behind her more gunfire. A scream. Male. Agonized. Wrong. Madison forced herself not to look back. She ran through alleys that smelled like garbage and desperation. Lungs burning, vision blurring with tears she couldn't afford to shed. A black SUV screeched around the corner. Sarah Chen behind the wheel. Get in! She shouted. Madison threw herself into the passenger seat. The SUV accelerated before she'd even closed the door. Damien! Madison gasped. I know. Sarah's voice was flat. Marcus triggered the emergency protocol, which means Damien's either captured or dead. We have to go back. We can't. Sarah took a corner so fast the tires screamed. That's what the protocol means. Keep Madison safe at all costs, even if it costs everything else. I don't care about the protocol. Damien does. Sarah's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. And he just sacrificed himself to give you time to escape. So you're going to honor that sacrifice by surviving long enough to destroy the man who orchestrated this entire nightmare. Madison pressed her hands against her face and tried not to scream. Behind them, sirens wailed. Ahead of them, the city sprawled in darkness. And somewhere in a blown-apart safe house, Damien Moretti was either bleeding out or being dragged into federal custody while Madison ran like the coward she'd sworn she'd never be. Sarah's phone rang. She answered on speaker. "Talk to me." Marcus's voice came through, rough with pain. "They have him. Damien surrendered to prevent them from pursuing Madison. Ross is transporting him to federal holding right now." "Is he hurt?" "Took a round in the side, not fatal, but he needs medical attention they're not giving him." Marcus exhaled roughly. "Ross wants to break him before lawyers arrive, before media gets wind of the arrest, before anyone can interfere." "How long do we have?" "Unknown, but Ross is operating off books right now, which means whatever he's planning, it's not official procedure." Sarah's hands tightened on the wheel. "Where are they taking him?" "I don't know, but Victor Castellanos just arrived at the scene, and he looked—" Marcus's voice cracked. "He looked like a man about to commit murder and call it justice." The line went dead. Sarah drove in silence for 3 blocks before pulling into an underground parking garage and killing the engine. She turned to Madison. "Here's what's going to happen," Sarah said. "I'm going to get you out of the country. Tonight. Within 2 hours. I have resources Damien doesn't know about, extraction routes Victor can't track. You'll be safe. And Damien? Damien's going to face whatever Victor has planned for him." Sarah's expression was granite. "And there's nothing you can do about it except survive long enough to make sure his sacrifice means something." Madison's hands clenched into fists. "No. Madison, no." She met Sarah's eyes with a certainty that came from somewhere deeper than logic or self-preservation. "I'm not running while the man I love is being tortured by a corrupt prosecutor. I'm not saving myself by abandoning him. I'm done being a coward. Going back is suicide. Then I'll die." Madison's voice was steel. "But I'll die fighting instead of living with the knowledge that I ran when he needed me most." Sarah stared at her for a long moment. Then she smiled, grim and fierce and genuinely impressed. "Okay," Sarah said. "Then we're going to need weapons, a very stupid plan, and the kind of luck that doesn't actually exist." She started the engine again. "Because we're about to wage war against a federal prosecutor who has unlimited resources and absolutely nothing to lose." "What kind of plan?" "The kind where we break into a federal facility, extract a wounded Mafia boss from custody, and escape before Victor Castellanos realizes what's happening." Sarah's smile was savage. "It's going to be loud, bloody, and probably get us both killed." "When do we start?" "Now." Sarah pulled out her phone and made a call. "Marcus, I need you to gather everyone still loyal to Damien, everyone who owes him. Everyone who'd rather die than watch Victor Castellanos destroy the man who saved their lives." "How many people are we talking?" Marcus asked. "Enough to storm a federal holding facility and extract one extremely stubborn Mafia boss who just sacrificed himself to save the woman he loves." Sarah glanced at Madison. "Because apparently Madison Cole is just as stubborn, and I'm too old to let her wage war alone." Madison's chest tightened with something that felt dangerously close to hope. "We're going to get him back," she said. "Probably not," Sarah replied honestly. "But we're going to die trying, and that's better than living with regret." The SUV accelerated out of the parking garage and back into the November night. Somewhere across the city, Damien Moretti was being held by people who wanted to destroy him. But for the first time in hours, he wasn't facing it alone, because Madison Cole had just declared war, and she was done running from the fight. The federal holding facility sat on the outskirts of Manhattan, like a concrete monument to institutional violence. 12 floors of reinforced steel and bulletproof glass, designed to contain the kind of people society had decided didn't deserve second chances. Madison stared at it through the SUV windshield and felt her resolve waver for the first time since deciding to wage war against Victor Castellanos. "That's a fortress," she said quietly. "Yes, Sarah's voice was flat. Which is why we're not going through the front door. Marcus sat in the back seat, shoulder wrapped in makeshift bandages that were already bleeding through. He'd gathered 6 people in the past 90 minutes. Former associates of Damien's organization who owed him enough to risk their lives breaking into a federal facility. Not an army. Barely a squad. But it was what they had. The building has 3 entry points, Marcus said, pulling up blueprints on a tablet. Main entrance with armed guards and metal detectors. Loading dock in the rear with vehicle barriers and surveillance. And a service entrance on the east side used by maintenance crews. Which one are we using? Madison asked. None of them. Marcus zoomed in on a section of the blueprint. We're using the underground parking garage. It connects to the building's lower levels through a service tunnel that's only monitored by cameras, not guards. Sarah's contact in building maintenance is going to create a power surge that kills the cameras for approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes to get in, find Damien, and get out? Madison's voice cracked. That's impossible. It's all we have. Sarah checked her watch. The surge happens in 12 minutes, which means we move now or we don't move at all. Madison's hands trembled as she pulled on the Kevlar vest Sarah had provided. Too large, designed for someone with actual combat training instead of a freelance journalist who'd never held a gun in her life. Sarah handed her a pistol. I don't know how to use this, Madison said. Point it at things you want to stop existing. Pull the trigger. Repeat until the threat is neutralized, or you're dead. Sarah's voice held grim humor. It's not complicated. I've never shot anyone. You're about to. Sarah met her eyes with the kind of hard certainty that came from experience. Because the people inside that building will kill you without hesitation if you give them the chance. So you don't give them the chance. You shoot first. You survive. You process the guilt later. Madison's stomach turned, but she took the gun. The SUV pulled into the parking garage and descended 3 levels into shadow and concrete that smelled like exhaust and institutional neglect. Sarah killed the engine near a service door marked with warnings about authorized personnel only. Marcus checked his watch. 2 minutes. The team assembled in silence. 6 hardened criminals who'd spent years following Damien's orders, 1 former witness who'd disappeared into protection to escape this exact world, and 1 terrified journalist who'd chosen loyalty over survival. It was the stupidest rescue attempt Madison had ever heard of. It was also the only chance Damien had. Listen carefully, Marcus said quietly. We have 4 minutes from the moment the power surge hits. We go in fast. We go in quiet until quiet stops being an option. Our intel says Damien's being held on sub-level 2 in an interrogation room Victor's been using off books. No official records, no oversight, just Victor and whoever he's brought in to make Damien talk. What if he's already dead? One of the team members asked. Then we retrieve his body and make sure Victor Castellanos pays for it. Marcus's voice was steel. Either way, we're not leaving him there. Silence. Then Sarah's phone buzzed. Power surge in 30 seconds. 4 minutes starting now. Good luck. Marcus moved to the service door and pulled out tools Madison didn't recognize. The lock clicked. The door opened into darkness that smelled like mildew and violence. They went in. The service tunnel was narrow and poorly lit, lined with pipes that dripped condensation and electrical conduits that hummed with dangerous current. Madison's heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought everyone could hear it. No one spoke. They moved through the tunnel like ghosts, weapons raised, every step calculated to minimize noise. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a wider corridor. Marcus held up a fist. Everyone stopped. He peered around the corner, then pulled back and made hand signals Madison didn't understand. Sarah leaned close and whispered in her ear, 2 guards. Sublevel 2 access is through that checkpoint. We take them quietly, or the entire facility locks down. How do we... Marcus was already moving. He crossed the distance to the first guard with inhuman speed, one hand covering the man's mouth, while the other did something to his neck that made him go instantly limp. The second guard reached for his radio. Sarah shot him. The suppressed gunshot was barely louder than a cough, but in the concrete silence it sounded like a cannon. The guard dropped. So much for quiet, one of the team muttered. Move! Marcus grabbed the first guard's access card and swiped it through the checkpoint reader. The door clicked open. We have maybe 2 minutes before someone notices these guards aren't responding to check-ins. They poured through the door into sublevel 2. The corridor was institutional white and fluorescent bright, the kind of environment designed to strip away humanity and leave only compliance. Doors lined both sides. Most were closed. A few stood open, revealing empty interrogation rooms with metal tables bolted to the floor and chairs designed for restraint. Marcus checked each room with practiced efficiency. Empty, empty, empty. Then he stopped outside the last door on the left. "He's in there," Marcus said quietly. "I can hear voices." Madison moved closer and pressed her ear against the door. Victor Castellanos' voice, controlled and professional. "I'm going to ask you one more time, Mr. Moretti. Where is Madison Cole?" Silence. Then a sound that made Madison's blood freeze. The wet, meaty impact of flesh against flesh. Damien's voice rough with pain. "I told you. She's gone. You'll never find her." "We both know that's a lie." Victor's tone never changed. "Sarah Chen is good, but she's not that good. We'll find Madison within 48 hours. The only question is whether you'll still be alive to watch her arrest." Another impact. Madison's hands clenched around the pistol. "We go in on 3, Marcus whispered. "Fast and overwhelming, neutralize threats, extract Damien, questions later." The team nodded. Marcus counted silently. 1, 2, 3. He kicked the door open. The room exploded into chaos. Victor Castellanos stood over Damien, who was zip-tied to a metal chair with blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. 2 men in tactical gear flanked Victor, private contractors, not federal agents, which meant this entire interrogation was off books and illegal. Marcus shot the first contractor before anyone could react. Sarah took the second. Victor dove for cover behind the table. Madison ran to Damien. His eyes widened when he saw her. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Saving you, apparently." Her hands shook as she pulled out a knife and cut through the zip ties. "Can you walk?" "I can run if it means getting you out of here." Damien stood, wincing from the gunshot wound in his side that had bled through the makeshift bandaging. "You were supposed to be on a plane to safety. Plans changed." Madison steadied him as he swayed. "I decided I'd rather storm a federal facility than live without you. We can discuss my poor decision-making later." Gunfire erupted in the hallway. Marcus appeared in the doorway. "We've got company. Multiple hostiles incoming from the stairwell." "How many?" Sarah demanded. "Too many." Marcus fired 3 shots down the corridor. "We need another exit." Damien pulled away from Madison and moved to the wall, hands running across what looked like solid concrete. "There's a maintenance shaft behind this panel. It connects to the parking garage on sublevel 3. We used it during construction to move equipment." "Can we access it?" Sarah asked. "If someone hasn't sealed it in the past 8 years." Damien's hands found a seam in the wall and pulled. The panel came away, revealing a narrow shaft that descended into darkness. "Looks clear. Everyone in. Now." The team poured into the shaft. Madison hesitated at the entrance, looking back at Victor Castellanos, who was pulling himself up from behind the table, reaching for a weapon, face twisted with rage. Their eyes met. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Victor said quietly. "I will hunt you to the ends of the earth. I will destroy everyone you've ever cared about, and I will make sure your name becomes synonymous with everything criminal and corrupt." "Try it," Madison said. Her voice was steady now, cold with the kind of certainty that came from crossing lines she could never uncross. "And I'll publish every piece of evidence Damien gave me. I'll expose you as the monster you are, and I'll make sure the world knows Victor Castellanos spent 20 years pretending to prosecute the criminals he was actually protecting." She pulled out her phone, not the one that had been destroyed, a different burner Sarah had provided, and showed Victor the screen. A draft article, already written, already uploaded to a server with instructions to publish if Madison didn't check in every 12 hours. Victor's face went pale. "That's right," Madison said. "You don't control this narrative anymore. I do. So you're going to drop the investigation into me and Damien. You're going to destroy that fabricated indictment. You're going to disappear from our lives permanently, or I hit send and watch your entire empire collapse in real time. You don't have the evidence to prove. I have financial records showing $200 million in offshore accounts. I have video footage of you meeting with Agent Ross. I have testimony from 3 witnesses willing to confirm your corruption." Madison stepped closer to the shaft entrance but kept her eyes on Victor. and I have the credibility you tried to destroy. Which means when I publish this story, people will believe me. Because unlike you, I'm not a monster pretending to be righteous. I'm just someone telling the truth. Victor's hand tightened on his weapon. Don't, Damien's voice came from inside the shaft. You shoot her. Marcus puts 3 rounds in your chest before you can blink. You let her go. We all disappear, and you get to keep pretending you're one of the good guys. Victor looked between Madison and the shaft, calculating odds, weighing options. Then he lowered the weapon. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. Madison backed into the shaft. You just don't know it yet. She dropped into darkness. The maintenance shaft was exactly as terrible as Madison had imagined. Narrow, rusted, and descending at an angle that made climbing down feel like controlled falling. Her hands scraped against metal. Her knees slammed into rivets. Above her she could hear shouting as more guards discovered the interrogation room. Below, Damien's voice. Keep moving! The shaft exits into the parking garage near the south wall. Madison descended until her arms burned and her vision blurred with exhaustion. Then she dropped the final 10 feet and landed hard on concrete that knocked the air from her lungs. Hands grabbed her. Damien's hands, pulling her upright, checking her for injuries with the kind of desperate efficiency that suggested he'd been terrified she wouldn't make it. I'm okay, Madison gasped. Are you? I'll live. Damien's eyes searched hers in the dim garage lighting. But we need to move before they seal the exits. The team was already running toward the SUV. Sarah had the engine started before everyone had even piled inside. They accelerated out of the garage with tires screaming, burst through the barrier arm like it was made of paper, and hit the street doing 60 miles an hour. Behind them, alarms wailed. Ahead, the city sprawled in midnight darkness. No one spoke for the first 3 minutes. Then Damien said quietly, You were supposed to run. I don't take orders from Mafia bosses, Madison replied, hands still shaking with adrenaline. Even ones I love. You could have died. So could you. She turned to face him fully. You surrendered to save me. You let them torture you to buy me time to escape. Did you really think I was just going to accept that sacrifice and move on? Yes. Damien's voice was raw. Because that's what smart people do. They survive. Then I guess I'm not that smart. Madison's laugh was bitter and exhausted. Because I'd rather die fighting beside you than live safely without you. Damien stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into a kiss that tasted like blood and desperation and the terrifying realization that they'd both just committed crimes that would haunt them forever. When they broke apart, Sarah was watching them in the rearview mirror. So what's the plan now? She asked. Because you just made permanent enemies of a corrupt federal prosecutor and probably half the law enforcement establishment on the East Coast. Now we disappear, Damien said. For real this time. New identities, new country, new life. And Victor? Madison asked. Madison? Victor gets exactly what he threatened us with. Damien pulled out his phone, somehow still functional despite everything, and opened an email. I'm sending the evidence to every major news outlet simultaneously. By tomorrow morning, his corruption will be front-page news. By next week, he'll be under investigation himself. By next month, he'll be in the same prison system he spent 20 years filling. That's not justice, Sarah said quietly. That's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. Damien hit send. Done. The evidence is out there. Nothing Victor can do will stop it now. Madison watched the city pass outside the window and tried to process what they'd just done. They'd stormed a federal facility. They'd shot guards and contractors. They'd threatened a prosecutor with exposure. They'd committed crimes that would earn them decades in prison if they were ever caught. And somehow, Madison didn't regret any of it, because the alternative was watching Damien die alone while she ran, and she was done running. The SUV drove through the night toward Teterboro Airport, where Damien's private jet waited with enough fuel to reach destinations that didn't have extradition treaties with the United States. Sarah pulled into the private aviation terminal and killed the engine. This is where we part ways, she said, turning to face them. I've got a daughter in Portland who thinks I'm dead. I'd like to keep it that way, which means I can't be associated with whatever happens next. Thank you, Damien said quietly. For everything, for helping Madison, for risking your life when you didn't have to. I owed you. Sarah's expression softened slightly. You saved my daughter when the people I testified against tried to kill her. This makes us even. It makes us family, Damien corrected. And family doesn't keep score. Sarah smiled, yeah, genuine and warm and achingly brief. Take care of her, Damien. She's braver than either of us deserves. I know. Damien's hand found Madison's and squeezed. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that bravery. Madison and Damien climbed out of the SUV. Marcus and the team dispersed into the night with cash and instructions to disappear until the heat died down. Sarah drove away without looking back, and Madison and Damien walked toward a private jet that would carry them to a future neither of them could predict. The pilot was a woman in her 50s who looked like she'd flown through worse situations than extracting fleeing criminals. Mr. Moretti? She said professionally. Ms. Morgan, we're cleared for immediate departure. Destination? Somewhere without extradition, Damien said. Your discretion. Argentina it is. The pilot gestured toward the cabin. Make yourselves comfortable. Flight time is approximately 11 hours. They boarded. The cabin was exactly as obscenely luxurious as Madison expected. Leather seats that reclined into beds, a full bar, entertainment systems that probably cost more than her former apartment. The jet's engines roared to life. Madison buckled herself into a seat and watched through the window as the airport fell away beneath them, then the city, then the entire eastern seaboard disappearing into darkness and distance. Everything she'd ever known was down there. Her mother, her career, her entire identity as Madison Cole. All of it gone. Replaced by Rachel Morgan, fugitive, accomplice to crimes she could barely comprehend, woman who'd chosen love over literally everything else. Damien sat beside her, still bleeding from wounds that needed real medical attention, watching her face with an expression that looked dangerously close to guilt. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what? For destroying your life. His voice was rough. 3 weeks ago, you were a journalist trying to survive a family reunion. Now you're a fugitive fleeing the country with a man the world considers a monster. That's my fault. Madison turned to face him fully. You didn't destroy my life, Damien. You saved it. I made you a criminal. You made me brave. She took his hand, threading her fingers through his. For 28 years, I played it safe. I avoided risks. I stayed small and invisible and desperately alone because I was terrified of becoming my father. Terrified of making mistakes that would hurt people I cared about. Terrified of wanting anything badly enough to fight for it. And now? Now I know what it feels like to fight for something that matters. Madison's voice steadied. I know what it feels like to choose loyalty over safety, to risk everything for someone who sees me as more than just another person to pity or judge. You didn't destroy me, Damien. You made me realize I was already destroying myself by refusing to live. Damien's eyes held hers with an intensity that made breathing difficult. I love you, he said. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I already regret it, Madison admitted, but I'm choosing it anyway, because regret means I cared enough to try, and I'm done living a life where I'm too afraid to care. Damien pulled her close and kissed her like she was oxygen, and he'd been drowning. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. What do we do now? Madison asked. After Argentina. After the evidence destroys Victor, after we've been running long enough that we forget what home feels like. We build a new home. Damien's voice was quiet but certain. Somewhere no one knows our names. Somewhere we can wake up without wondering if today's the day our past catches up with us. Somewhere we can just be. And your empire? Your organization? Everything you built? I'm dismantling it. Damien pulled back enough to meet her eyes. Before we left, I sent instructions to liquidate every criminal operation, redirect the money into legitimate businesses or charitable foundations, cut ties with everyone who profited from violence. He paused. I meant what I said about wanting out, about wanting something real. You just gave me the courage to actually do it. Madison's chest tightened. That's going to make you enemies. I already have enemies. His smile was grim. At least now I'll have something worth protecting more than power. The jet climbed higher, leaving the eastern seaboard behind and heading south toward a future neither of them could predict. Madison closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the cabin windows and Damien was asleep beside her, hand still holding hers like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. Madison watched him sleep and thought about the past 3 weeks. The helicopter landing on her quiet street. The family reunion where Damien had defended her without hesitation. The penthouse negotiations that had turned into something real. The federal interrogation that had tried to destroy her. The choice to fight instead of run. None of it had been easy. None of it had been safe. But all of it had been worth it. Because Madison Cole, now Rachel Morgan, had finally learned what it meant to be brave enough to want something badly enough to burn for it. The jet touched down in Buenos Aires 12 hours later. Argentina sprawled beneath them in summer heat and unfamiliar beauty. A city where no one knew their faces, no one cared about their crimes, and no one would ask questions they didn't want to answer. Immigration was easier than it should have been, which suggested Damien had paid someone significant money to look the other way. They took a car to a house in the suburbs, modest by Damien's standards, which meant it was still nicer than anywhere Madison had ever lived. The house had a garden, a view of mountains, enough distance from the city to feel like safety. It felt like the beginning of something instead of the end. Madison stood in the garden, watching sunset paint the mountains gold, while Damien spoke with contractors about security systems and escape routes because old habits died hard. Her phone buzzed. The burner Sarah had given her. Text message from an unknown number. Victor Castellanos arrested this morning on 17 counts of corruption, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. Your story broke 6 hours ago. Every major outlet is running it. You won. Sarah. Madison stared at the message for a long moment. Then she forwarded it to Damien and watched his expression shift from controlled to something that looked dangerously close to relief. It's over, she said. For now. Damien pulled her close. But we still have a long way to go before we're really safe. I know. Madison pressed her face against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. But we're going together, and that's enough. They stood in the garden until the sun disappeared completely and stars appeared in unfamiliar constellations. Then they went inside to a house that didn't feel like home yet, but might someday. And they started building a life that had nothing to do with helicopters or federal investigations or family reunions designed to make Madison feel small. A life built on honesty and loyalty and the terrifying courage it took to choose love over safety. A life that would probably always carry the weight of crimes committed and lines crossed. But a life they'd chosen together, and that made it worth every scar. 6 months later, Madison sat in a cafe in Buenos Aires writing under her new name. Not journalism anymore. She couldn't risk the exposure. Fiction instead. Stories about women who made terrible choices and survived them anyway. Stories about men who tried to be better than the monsters they'd been raised to become. Stories about love that cost everything and was worth it anyway. The work was different from what she'd done before. More honest somehow. Less concerned with exposing corruption and more focused on understanding the human capacity for redemption. Damien walked through the cafe door carrying flowers he'd bought from a street vendor. Not expensive hothouse roses, just simple wildflowers that smelled like the garden they'd planted together. He kissed her forehead and sat down across from her. How's the writing? He asked. Slow. Madison closed her laptop. I keep getting distracted by the fact that I'm sitting in a cafe in Argentina with a man who used to be a Mafia boss and is now trying to figure out what retirement looks like. Any conclusions? It looks boring. Damien's smile was real. I spent 15 years terrified of being weak. Turns out being weak is actually kind of nice. You're not weak, you're just human. Same thing in my world. Then maybe you needed a new world. Madison reached across the table and took his hand. How are you doing? Really? Damien was quiet for a moment. I miss parts of it. The power, the certainty, the knowledge that I could solve any problem with enough money or violence. He paused. But I don't miss who I had to be to have those things. And I definitely don't miss being alone. You're not alone anymore. I know. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. That's the part that makes retirement bearable. Knowing I gave up an empire but gained something infinitely more valuable. Madison's phone buzzed. Email notification. From her mother. The first communication they'd had since Madison had disappeared 6 months ago. She opened it with shaking hands. Madison, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if you're even alive, but I need you to know that I understand why you left. And I'm sorry for what I said that last time we spoke. Your father destroyed our family with lies, but you saved yourself by finally telling the truth about who you are and what you want. That takes more courage than I ever had. I don't know if I'll ever see you again, but wherever you are, I hope you're happy. And I hope you found something worth the sacrifice. Love, Mom. Madison read the email 3 times, tears blurring the words. Then she showed it to Damien. Are you going to respond? He asked quietly. I don't know. Madison's voice cracked. Responding means admitting I'm alive, which means admitting I chose this life, which means accepting that I can never go back to being the person I was before I met you. Is that a bad thing? No. Madison wiped her eyes. It's just permanent, and permanence is terrifying. So is loneliness. Damien squeezed her hand. But we're not lonely anymore, we're just different. And different is better than empty. Madison stared at the email for another long moment. Then she hit reply and typed, Mom, I'm alive. I'm safe. I'm happy. And I'm sorry for everything this cost you. I can't tell you where I am. I can't promise I'll ever come home, but I can tell you that I finally understand what it means to fight for something instead of just surviving. Thank you for understanding, even if it took 6 months. Love, Madison. She hit send before she could talk herself out of it. The email disappeared into the void. Maybe her mother would respond. Maybe she wouldn't. Maybe this was the last communication they'd ever have. But it was honest, and honesty was all Madison had left. She closed her laptop and looked at Damien, at silver eyes that had seen violence and chosen gentleness, at hands that had built an empire and were now learning to build a garden. Ready to go home? He asked. Yes. Madison stood and took his hand. Let's go home. They walked out of the cafe together into Buenos Aires sunshine. No helicopters this time. No family reunions. No federal agents or corrupt prosecutors or media circuses. Just 2 people who'd burned their old lives to the ground and were slowly building something new from the ashes. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't safe. It wasn't anything Madison had imagined when she'd hired a fake fiancé to survive one brutal family dinner. But it was real. And real was enough. Damien pulled her close as they walked through streets that smelled like empanadas and coffee and the distant promise of rain. I love you, he said quietly. I know. Madison smiled against his shoulder. You told me by landing a helicopter on my street. I told you by choosing you over everything else. Same thing. They walked home to a house with a garden and a view of mountains and enough distance from their past to feel like maybe, someday, they'd finally be free of it. And in the quiet moments between planting flowers and writing stories and learning what it meant to be human instead of hunted, Madison Cole, now Rachel Morgan forever, realized something extraordinary. She'd spent her entire life terrified of becoming her father, terrified of making choices that would hurt people she loved, terrified of wanting anything badly enough to fight for it. But in the end, she'd made the hardest choice of all. She'd chosen love over safety, loyalty over law, courage over fear. And somehow, impossibly, she'd survived. Not because she was stronger than she'd thought, but because she'd finally found someone worth being strong for. Damien Moretti had landed a helicopter on her quiet suburban street 3 weeks before her life exploded, and Madison Cole had chosen to burn with him instead of surviving alone. It was the worst decision she'd ever made. It was also the best. And that paradox, the way terrible choices could lead to beautiful outcomes, the way monsters could become human when someone loved them enough to see past the violence, became the foundation of every story Madison wrote for the rest of her life. Stories about redemption and sacrifice and the terrifying courage it took to choose love when the world said you should choose survival. Stories that were entirely fictional, except for the parts that weren't. And in a garden in Buenos Aires, while sunset painted the mountains gold and wildflowers bloomed in soil they'd planted together, Madison and Damien built a life that had nothing to do with the people they'd been and everything to do with the people they were becoming. It wasn't the ending Madison had imagined, but it was the ending she'd chosen, and that made all the difference.